Good morning. Thank you for your patience. We'll call to order the meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. Mr. Snow.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Your first item today is going to be your citizens' participation.
Now, this agenda item, so everybody understands, if you want to speak on any of the posted agenda items for public comment, now is the opportunity. Once the agenda begins, we will not be taking comment as the items are heard. So if you have any agenda items that you'd like to speak on, now is the time. We also have a public participation comment period at the end of the meeting, and that has traditionally been to speak on items not on the agenda. So again, if you would like to speak, now is the opportunity.
My name is Joba Figlia. I'm a member of the Citizens Committee for Better Transit. I have been involved in transit issues when there was only 13 buses that were supplying transportation for the citizens of Las Vegas. We were instrumental in getting the federal government to fund the new bus system because of our efforts. What's so interesting to me is I'm what is known as a gadfly. I come to these meetings and I vent my spleen and comment on issues and items, but because of my background and the effort that I made in investigations of some of the transitional things that took place, I was lucky enough to expose corruption at City Hall during the realm of Ron Lurie. I exposed corruption to the RTC when they switched the specifications for the buses and got away with it. What I found over the years, I was also instrumental in exposing the CETA regime where the head man wound up with 3 years in a federal penitentiary. These things I'm very proud of. And most of the time I'm ignored, which is okay with me. One of my examples was when Jan Jones was the mayor. Her statement was...
Joe, excuse me just for a sec.
Yeah.
These comments may be better
No,
stated
I
at
got to
the-
get them off now because I ain't got
No,
time.
is there an agenda item that
Yeah,
you're speaking
well,
to?
it's regards to the bid.
Okay.
It's all included,
Thank
okay?
you.
And Jan Jones used to say, "Thank you, Joe," and a tone of voice was, "Get the hell out of here." Didn't bother me. I have done a lot of work over the years undercover during the realm of Citizens Committee for Better Transit. You can thank us for the bus system if you look at the record. Now, what's important is I'm very astute in smelling a rat. And usually when I smell a rat comes to the surface. Now, the issue of this bus bid is very scary. Something is going on here. I took all the information I gathered and I took it to the feds. Now, the feds may be listening. They were listening during the regime of the county commission when they all got busted and wound up in a penitentiary. Never fear that the FBI ain't listening. You may go forward with this bid, and frankly, I don't care who's successful as long as it's an honest bid and it's done properly with the integrity that this commission should endure. If that happens, then God bless all of us. But if there is a rat, trust me, the FBI is listening and somebody may wind up going to jail. And it would just please me to no end for some of the officials that are playing games with votes wind up behind bars where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Chairperson. My name is Herman Ross with National Insurance Consultants. I'm also the MBEIC Chair, the Minority Business Enterprise Input Committee Chairperson for the Nevada Minority Business Council. For full disclosure, I'm also the insurance agent for Veolia Transportation, and I have been for over the last 7 years that they've operated it, and for the last 19 years prior to that as a ATC Vancom vendor as well as NEC vendor. I want to respond to two things and talk about two things here with regards to the impact in the community that this will have an adverse effect to many businesses that have been growing in this community as part of this contract. I go to the last page of the actual, excuse me, MBE requirements that are put in this document based on the contract itself. And I note, and I want to note for all of you, that the majority of that is going to one firm. That firm is licensed and originally comes from Texas, and there's no local participation outside of 1%. That is a dramatic reduction, and in particular from our contract, and the people that we would lose and the money that we would lose from our firm and other firms that are supported in this community. One of the things that I can tell you is that I have tried to work with other groups. We've had conversations here locally with regards to City Council, County Commissioners on how we can do that. We've effectively spoken with members of the RTC on how to be able to do that. And we are aware that it is very hard for the RTC and for you as commissioners to, at this particular point in time, evaluate how we can make sure that local businesses don't lose on this particular contract. I find it very difficult when I've worked with that firm, Veolia, and I've tried to work with other firms in the area with regards to participation on local contracts for local people. When you look at the dollar amount that one particular firm is going to get, it far exceeds any other firms that I'm aware of, that they would therefore be taking one particular firm, and I'm not picking on that firm because I do contracts outside of Nevada myself on transportation systems. However, as we go into other cities and other municipalities, we find that there are local preferences attached. And working with the RTC, we've discovered and kind of recently discovered that it's very hard for the RTC to go outside that realm with regards to the DBE because their hands are tied. Totally understandable. However, as members of city councils, as members of county commissions, it would behoove you to take a look at the specifics to that contract and how one particular DBE can take that much money back and take it out of this community. On another note, when you take a look at the past of these two companies, when you look at their DBE participation, not just here on current contracts, because they're both here, you need to take into consideration the adverse effect it's going to have on this community, not just the price of the contract. We're going to lose, as we already have in Las Vegas, more employees are going to be out of work, in particular in my firm. Revenue loss for local companies, and that has an adverse effect to the community. If we continue to do that, how many people are going to have to lose their jobs over this contract, and how many do you think is going to be able to take that money back out of this community? As the head of the National Minority Supplier Development Council's MBEIC, we have gone around the country and we speak to commissions and city councils with regards to how you can apply those. And what we're looking for is some help with regards to making sure that this contract itself, as it is awarded, there is local participation on the contract. I can tell you the difference, plain and simple. I'm on 18 contracts around the country. I do 18 major transit systems. I've tried to work with other groups, not specifically First Transit, not specifically MV, but those two particular firms that I've worked with in the past have not come anywhere close, not anywhere close to the participation of helping women and minority-owned businesses in this community and other communities that we serve. I would suggest that we take a new look at this, take a different approach, and that you reject this as a award today. Thank you very much, and I hope that you take a listen to that.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tony Timmons with the Laughlin Chamber of Commerce. I'm the president, 1585 South Casino Drive in Laughlin. A couple letters I'd like to read into the record, please, and I do have copies for the commissioners as well as for the public record. First one is from the Riverside Resort, and this pertains to the agenda item number 41. Dear Commissioners, I'm informed that on August 11th, the Commission will revisit the matter of awarding the successful competent bidder for the fixed route contract in Las Vegas. Not enough can be said for the quality of service provided in the Laughlin area by our existing transportation service Silver Rider. Not enough can be said for the critical service provided to the employees of not only the Riverside Resort and Casino, but all the commercial properties in Laughlin. Loss of the service would be devastating to the countless families, many of whom are single parents, who rely on Silver Rider as their only mode of transportation. Silver Rider currently stops at the front of the condominium complex where this rider resides. The population of our community is essentially the elderly, many of which have no vehicle. For doctor and dental appointments, as well as grocery shopping, they rely on Silver Rider. For information made available to me, this appears that if for some reason the Commission opted to award the contract to the high bidder, loss of service in the Laughlin area and other rural areas would be probable. This would cause irreparable injury. It would appear to me that the decision and vote has to be based on two salient features. One, sensitivity to the need of the public. Two, the wisdom of the conserving not only public funds, but also public trust by awarding the contract to the lowest responsible bidder. In advance, I wish to thank you for your time and consideration, and this is signed Herm Walker, Corporate Attorney for the Riverside Resort. Dear Commissioners, as Chair of the Workforce Development in Laughlin and Executive Director of the Laughlin Chamber of Commerce, I am extremely concerned about the possible cuts of up to 100,000 hours out of the existing bus service in Laughlin. I implore you to accept the low bidder as the winner of the contract for bus operations and maintenance so that residents in the rural communities don't lose the transit service that is vital to our existence. Because so many of Laughlin's employees count on bus service to get them to their jobs, this would be devastating for many as it is their only form of transportation. I am hopeful by submitting our concerns you will consider the contract before you. Even in this depressed economic climate, buses in Laughlin are still transporting over 22,000 rides per month. And that's on 40-foot buses. This is impressive in a community that has approximately 8,000 people. I can tell you that rural transit providers across the country envy that ridership. If the low bidder is not awarded the contract, it would put the rural communities at risk of losing the transit just to pay $50 million more unnecessarily over a 7-year period. Please consider our residents and their families in our rural community when you cast your vote. Thank you so much for your consideration and support of Laughlin. This letter is signed Connie Davis, Executive Director of the Laughlin Chamber of Commerce. This letter is from the Laughlin Tourism Commission. Dear Commissioner Brown, the Laughlin Tourism Commission, a nonprofit organization that represents 6 gaming resorts in Laughlin, is very concerned about the Regional Transportation Commission's potential vote in favor of a proposal by Veolia to supply fixed route transportation in the Las Vegas area. The LTC employs more than 6,000 individuals, of which a noteworthy number utilize public transportation for their commute to and from work. With the distance from the housing corridor to Casino Drive, walking is not an option for many of the employees. When summer temperatures are factored in, and it could be up to 120 plus in Laughlin, not only is it unreasonable, but unsafe as well. In addition, the Southern Nevada Transit Coalition bus system supports tourism in Laughlin by providing visitors who arrive by air or bus an opportunity to travel between the casinos and business section of Laughlin. The SNTC also transports travelers and residents to and from Las Vegas several days per week, providing a valuable resource to the resorts, which is the area's economic engine. We are very concerned that approval of the $50 million higher bid will result in cutbacks to service in the Laughlin area, which will negatively impact our workforce and subsequently our ability to compete as a tourism destination. Laughlin Resort employees catered to nearly 2.4 million visitors in 2010 and are a vital component to our economy's viability. We strongly encourage you to support the lower bid from First Transit to avoid cuts during this trying economic time. LTC requests this letter to be included in the Commissioner's packet and read into the record at the public meeting on August 11th. Signed, Jeff Pfeffer, President of the Laughlin Tourism Commission. And the last letter, it is my understanding that the Regional Transportation Commission will vote on August 11th, item number 41 on the agenda, on a new contract for bus operations and maintenance. As this vote is of the utmost importance to the employees and citizens in Laughlin, I urge you to vote in favor of the lowest bidder, First Transit. Voting for First Transit will result in a savings of $50 million over a 7-year period. These increasingly hard times, we in this rural community of Laughlin cannot afford to have service and service hours on our route reduced, as bus service is critical to our destination and market. Many employees, resort guests, and local senior residents in Laughlin utilize this bus service on a daily basis. In addition, Silver Rider is a well-established operation in Laughlin and a key supporter of many charitable programs that are vital to the tri-state areas. Once again, I urge you, Councilman Ross, County Commissioner Brown, and County Commissioner Chris G., to vote for First Transit during this upcoming vote on August 11th. Sincerely, Sean Hammond, General Manager of the Aquarius Resort and Casino. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we get letters for their public record?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Sandra Raymaker, and I am the President-elect of the Mesquite Chamber of Commerce. I sit on the board. I am also the committee chair for the Government Affairs Committee. I have been asked to come here today and ask you to please vote responsibly for this bid as you go over it today. This could be devastating for the Mesquite area. Our citizens rely on the Silver Rider. Our community could lose so much if this vote doesn't stay with as it is. I mean, $50 million. The budget, where are the people going to come with the money to change that budget? The budgets have already been set. So we're asking you to please vote responsibly. We brought with us a few of the citizens from Mesquite today, and they're asking for you to please just be real responsible and look at where this is going to happen and what this will do to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, I'm Tom Janicki. I'm just one of the low people on the totem pole. I'm one of those that rely on the bus service. Now, I am sure each and every one of you have a car, and that's how you got here today. Well, I don't have a choice because I don't own a car because I am disabled to get anywhere that I need to go. If my bus services car is gone, your car just got stolen, basically, is what happens. So what am I supposed to, what do we do? If your car got stolen, what would you rely on to get to the grocery store, to go to the doctor? I can't make an appointment to cut my finger to go to the doctor. And if I am to buy, coming to taking a bid, I think the people who put the bid in should be responsible for what they bid on. They should know what they're bidding on. Not say, okay, here's the bid, but now we have to cut this to match that bid. No, you should cut your bid to match the services. And if a company can't do that, I don't care who they are. If you don't know what you're bidding on, why are you in business? It's just like if I was to sell a car to you for $1,000, you give me the $1,000, it's a done deal. It doesn't go anywhere. Why? Because there's no motor under the hood. Whose fault is it that didn't look for the motor? It's not me, the little guy that sold the car. You're the one that bought it. So if you make a bid, you should honor that bid. And our bus service cannot be cut, strictly because you're cutting off life support. People rely on that bus to go to the grocery store, to go to the doctor, to get to the hospital, to get from point A to point B. They rely on it. Without that ability to rely on it, there is no way for them to get around. They can't buy food. They can't go anywhere. They're dead in the water. And you as councilmen are making that decision upon which bid you take. So don't take this lightly, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, I'm Judy Thurman from Mesquite, Nevada, and I depend on the buses to go shopping and go to the doctors, and I have several senior citizen friends. If they did not have those buses come to the door to pick them up, they would never, ever be able to get out because they have no family there, they don't drive. And in fact, I talked to several of them before I came today, and they're just really devastated. They're so beside themselves. They said it's their only way to get out, to go to the senior center for lunch, to have fellowship with people at the senior citizen center, or to go to church, or to go to the doctors. If those buses are taken away from Mesquite, Nevada, it will dry up and die. The businesses will be no more. And it's not fair to Mesquite to lose our buses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is Maurice Kuhn. I'm an employee with Viola Transportation. I'm sitting here listening to all these people talk this morning. Everyone's talking about $50 million and the service that's going to be cut. Think about the lives when you put unsafe drivers out there driving every day. We have the best safety record in the United States for 19 years straight. There's not an NBA championship, an NFL team, or no one out there that's accomplished that. And I have a lot to speak for on behalf of our training. It's extensive. We're constantly bringing them in. We're briefing them on laws constantly every time they change. Our Viola company does a good job training employees. In order to hold a record like that, you have to be doing your job. And I would like to say today, maybe take it in consideration. Even if we don't get the contract, I would like to actually see some compromise. You have a service over here for paratransit, and on the other end, you have a service over here. But in order to get quality CDL drivers and get out there and do the job they do on a daily basis, it takes extensive training. If you go on our record and pull our file, you'll see all the things we've accomplished, whether or not it's known at the state level or at the council level. But those are some of the things I want you to take in consideration. I hadn't planned on speaking today, but it couldn't help to bother me. But one life lost, 50 million would not replace that life. You're talking about a differential in money as opposed to safety out there every day. Now, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. My name is Sergio Flores. I'm an employee of Veolia and a resident of Las Vegas. Now, one of the things that has bothered me right now is that a lot of people coming from Mesquite speaking out, and Laughlin speaking out, under the impression that if Veolia gets the contract, these cuts are going to be in place. The fact is that these cuts are going to be in place regardless of how this vote goes. But we know and we understand that these specs of the RFP, the process itself, needs to change. The commission right now has the opportunity to take this into consideration, throw out the bid, put the implementations that you need in place to make sure that this process is corrected for further future bids. We understand this, not just as a Veolia employee, as a resident of Las Vegas. How many times, even if First Transit is awarded this contract, 7 years from now, you're going to come down and do the same thing over and over again. This process itself has to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Phyllis Miller, and I live in Sun City, Mesquite. My interest in what is going on here today and what is going on, my interests are merely what is going on in my community. I am a resident there, and I have investments there that I hate to see compromised by something of this sort. I am a former government contract administrator of major contracts with Lockheed, Boeing, and Northrop. I understand the business of government contracting probably as well as anyone in this room. I've been educated in it, and I have many, many years' experience in it. And listening to the people today, it strikes me as peculiar that no one has talked about the fact, did you consider apples to apples contracts, or do you have apples to oranges contracts? Were the line items of the contracts compared side by side? Is this a cost type contract, or is this a fixed type contract? That makes a big difference. If it's a cost type contract, I can understand what this gentleman that was just up here said. The further on down the line, the low bidder can turn around and come up with all of these extras that were not in the original scope of work and raise the cost of the contract. If it is a fixed price contract, there's no reason why. I'm certain that you people have a procurement department, that they have analyzed these bids, and that they have made their recommendations to you. Notwithstanding all of the personal needs of the people, there is an awful lot of unhappiness in society today because we're very unhappy with the people who are running our governments at any level, whether it be the federal level or the local level. So I think that I don't want to say that I am challenging the board to the procedure that they took, or what motivated them to vote the way they voted. My concern as a customer, what's going to happen to my community of Mesquite? By the way, we have the same objectives as you do. We've suffered the same as you have here in Las Vegas. We've lost businesses. We've had businesses closed. We have an unemployment rate that is just as high as yours. We have a very broad-based spectrum of socioeconomic levels. We have a broad base of the differences in the ages of the people. We have a senior citizens community, and then we have a blue-collar community that is working in most of the hotels. I want to see my city grow, just as you want to see your city grow. How can we go out and try to bring businesses into our community when we don't have sufficient transportation? These people are going to be, anyone that we might approach to come and move their businesses into our community, transportation is one of the things they're going to look at. And I'm not certain in my own heart and in my own head that there was equity involved in the decision to come back and look at this situation again. I only urge you to please, in the proposal process, make sure that your decision is based on an apples-to-apples comparison. I find it very difficult to believe that $50 million over 5 or 7 years, whatever the period of time the contract is due solely to the quality of the drivers. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Before you start, by show of hands, how many would like to speak during this comment period? Okay. All right. You don't have to come up now. I just wanted to get a sense. We're going to let everybody speak. Just wanted to get a sense of where we are. Please. We've been all day with a couple of these meetings, so today should be no different. Please.
Good evening. My name is Shane Wonder. This is on Agenda 41. And closer to the mic? Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Mesquite. Thank you, Laughlin, for coming down. I understand your guys' concern on what's going on in your cities, your communities, and having the ridership, okay, having the buses being there. We are also concerned on having our jobs and having the wages stay the same, the benefits stay the same, no loss of jobs. I do believe that there has been some allegations, like my coworker said, of the routes being cut because of the bid. That's not, it's going to happen either way, just like they said, okay? And to prove that, the very first one, vote, it happened, okay? When First Transit was awarded the contract, there were still service cuts made, okay? So let's not base it off that. Let's base it on apples to apples, like previous lady said. I don't believe that's happening, and I believe there's some biased stuff that's being said in the press that should not be, and I think we need to look at the whole thing, and I urge Mesquite and Laughlin to understand also our side, that we're happy with Veolia. We want to remain with Veolia. We've taken the system to number 8. We, however, do not want to affect your guys' cities or communities. We want that to stay the same for you guys too, so maybe we can throw this out and come back and figure out something where everybody can benefit from this, right? Okay? I think that's what we want. We have enough unemployment, job losses, okay? People out there hunting for jobs. We need to do something to make it better for everybody, not just one side or the other side. Let's work together and make it better for everyone. Mesquite, Laughlin, Vegas.
Stanley Washington, Las Vegas, Chairman Brown, Commission. I obviously want to say a couple of things. My tune isn't going to change. I'm first of all going to give you a report on opening doors, Mr. Chairman. We're making great progress with that resolution. For the people in the audience who doesn't know, opening doors is the federal strategic plan to end homelessness in America for veterans by 2015 and for youth and families with children by 2020. There is a resolution that I've been circulating, starting with the Clark County Commission, who has approved it, on to the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Commission, who has approved it. I believe that Councilwoman Tarkanian is bringing it forth to the City of Las Vegas on August 17th for the City of Las Vegas Council to approve. Councilwoman Anita Wood is bringing it forth for North Las Vegas, August 17th for North Las Vegas to approve. Councilwoman Kathleen Boutin is bringing it forth to Henderson on August 16th for them to approve. I've yet to make it to Boulder City and to Mesquite, but I'm coming. I've also basically made it to Chairman Barnhart at the Gaming Commission. They're on board. And Mr. Chairman, obviously I can't leave this commission out as well. So I'll be asking Commissioner Chris G. to go ahead and forward you over that resolution so this body can adopt that same language as well, as this is something the whole state is getting on board, because the operative paragraph in that resolution is Nevada being first in the nation to rid itself among homelessness among its borders. And to that particular point, I can only say that the plan calls for all 300 million people, and it doesn't exclude anybody. And to date, Veolia has been all over it and is continuing to be a very quality player for this particular community. I've reached out to both sides. They know it. Haven't heard anything from First Transit side on this. Just so you know, Councilwoman Tarkanian, it gets down to the quality of what's best for this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlie Loomis. I am from Mesquite, and just about all the points that I wanted to make have been made, so I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I just want to say that in Mesquite we have a very high percentage of retired military, and some are able, some not so able. I don't believe there's anybody disabled. So I would hope that you would put that into your equation when making decisions about the possibility of cutting routes and times and so forth. It's very, very important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie.
Once again, good morning, everyone. My name is Bronwyn McKee. For everyone from Mesquite and Laughlin, especially those from Laughlin, I do have concerns in Laughlin. I have a daughter and 5 grandkids that depend on the bus service there, but I am also very concerned with what's going on here. I am a driver for Veolia. I love my company. I love my job. I love this city. Like stated before, I came out here from Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. So this was a big culture shock for me. We don't have buses over there. I've heard a lot of things from a lot of people about the way things have changed here over the last 20 years, and you're not going to get that by going backwards. Yes, maybe there is a problem with the balance of the budget, but there's got to be a reason. You've said it several times. Something's wrong. There's no way they can provide the same service that we're doing now with a lower bid. If nothing else, guys, if nothing else, throw it out and start over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Michael Chamberlain. I'm with the Nevada Business Coalition, and one of our primary focuses is to help reduce the unnecessary burdens of the state and county governments on taxpayers. In keeping with that goal, we strongly urge you to approve Agenda Item 41 and award the contract to First Transit. Staff's analysis indicates First Transit's bid is lower. Applied analysis, independent evaluation, concludes that even making assumptions in favor of Veolia, that First Transit's bid is lower than Veolia's. And the reference ratings from the outside markets are higher for First Transit than they are for Veolia. These analyses indicate that the RTC could potentially save as much as $50 million over the life of the contract. That's certainly going to help the taxpayers, and especially at a time when funds are so scarce, it's going to work to the benefit of the taxpayers of Clark County. And they could benefit from this. In addition, the savings could be put toward other areas that may need some work, paratransit services and the like. This bid is not from some fly-by-night company. First Transit has been providing similar services in markets similar to this, hundreds of markets, including ones comparable to Las Vegas. Applied analysis reports their pricing is not out of line with historical or other market data, and even in a worst-case scenario, the taxpayers would not suffer negative consequences. In other words, all of the available data and analysis indicates that First Transit is an experienced, reputable company that submitted a responsible proposal. So in the interest of the passengers, in the interest of the taxpayers, we urge you to approve Agenda Item Number 41 and award the contract to First Transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Linda Johnson Sanders. I'm from Veolia. And I just wish you would just take a little more time. I would like for everything to actually be rebidded on. And think about I know it's a heavy load, because it's a heavy load on me every time I get up here and talk to y'all. But please, if it's time, take a little more time. And I also have something that I provided y'all with and I would like to share. There is a destiny that makes us all brothers. No one goes his way alone. All we put into the life of others will come back into our own. Always remember to love and forgive. Take the time and really, really think this through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Calvin Gravel. I work for Veolia Transportation. My number is 9052. First, I want to talk to the people from Laughlin and Mesquite. Honestly, I don't know who threatened your routes. I don't know why that was even brought up, considering I know that if it's a demand, we will supply it. We've done a great job up to this point, and I think some of us in this room should be ashamed of ourselves. The RTC, you bought the equipment. We got diesel hybrid. We're very clean. We got the best equipment that you could buy. You bought that equipment. It costs money to maintain that equipment. We're not here to bash I'm not here to bash First Transit. I'm only saying that you look at the numbers. Everybody's talking about the numbers. They speak for themselves. The level of quality that we provide for maintenance of these vehicles that you went out and bought is superior and second to none. I'm not knocking First Transit. I thank them for coming out. I appreciate it. But you cannot tell me that they can take care of this business for $50 million cheaper and maintain this equipment. This is the best equipment money can buy, and you bought it. We're holding you accountable to make sure that we keep the equipment going. And the people of Laughlin and Mesquite, I think that we can provide them, keep their routes. I don't know who threatened their routes or threatened to cut their routes, but you should be ashamed of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mae Frisbie. I'm from Mesquite, a very new Mesquiter. I was actually asked to speak today by some teenagers who work after school and some other adults who also work in the afternoons and evenings. With the cuts that's going to be made and the future of however you vote, I am wondering if it's going to impact what proposed cuts there are now, proposed cuts, that is, if it's going to make it worse, or are we going to be completely out on our own? These people who I talk to or ask and have asked me to speak says, how will they get home? Sure, the bus will take them to work, but how will they get home? Especially late at night.
Thank you, Mae.
My name is Cindy Delaney, and I'm from Mesquite, Nevada. I'm a small business owner. I'm also a qualified CDL driver, and I'm married to a truck driver who has about a 30-year perfect record. So I fully understand and sympathize with the drivers. Problem is, in Mesquite, we could lose people's jobs there too. And I think they're not looking at that part of it. Because these people, as the lady before me just said, could be losing their way to get back and forth to work at the hospital, at the casinos, at the hotels. And I don't care how you look at it and how you compare apples to apples. $50 million is a lot of money. A lot of my clients depend on the bus service. A lot of our students depend on the bus service. A lot of our senior citizens, we have a lot of people. You know, Mesquite's different from Las Vegas, and I keep hearing people talk about Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a great city, but we're rural in the truest sense of the word. We are isolated from the rest of you guys. We're 80 miles north. We're not even as close as Laughlin. We have one taxi in our town, and the people that use the bus service can't afford to use that taxi. We realize that there's going to be route changes and maybe some route cuts. But with $50 million on the table, we're really scared that we're going to lose some of our services altogether. And I just implore you to really think about that as you vote. And just remember, we get to vote next time your turn comes around too.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Curtis Cummings. I'm president and CEO of the North Las Vegas, North Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce. I grew up in town, and 43 years ago, I rode the bus. I used to ride it from high school to work downtown when I was 13 years old. So I realized the value of access for you folks in Laughlin and Mesquite, and I know that's an important, critical element. But so is the dollar value. But I'm going to tell you about what I do know, and I don't know First Transit, but I do know Veolia. They've done things in the community that are not measurable. They have been outstanding corporate stewards, business stewards, and corporate citizens. They've been highly involved in the city of North Las Vegas in many ways, through Rotary, other charitable organizations, highly involved in business, support and sustainability of business and growth of business. They've been a great steward for our business community. And that's all I wanted to share with you folks this morning, that some of these measures are not measurable by normal means, as some of this objective quantification of the bid has not been absolutely measurable as we all would like. But I just wanted to share with you the good folks that we've gotten to know at Veolia, and have appreciated their business and cooperation all these years, and I look forward to a great future with them. Thank you.
Good morning. How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Captain Fletcher. I'm a worker for Veolia. I'm here as I listen to all the comments that's been taking place today, that from Mesquite, that from Laughlin. We should become a family. We should be united. It's not Veolia or First Transit doing these route cuts. It's RTC. It's not RTC getting this number 1.8. It's Veolia. What I'm here to say is, as we look into the difference in the bidding process, there's a language in that CBA and that towards that's given to you guys, the ladies and gentlemen, is that Veolia is willing to implement the procurement back into the operation of the system. We have a strong, good fleets out here in Las Vegas. We get comments we hear every day. It takes money to keep the maintenance of it to continue to grow. And I just ask you guys to take that in consideration, and hopefully we can implement a system to get more service out to Mesquite, to get more service out to Laughlin, and not just focus our main attention on what we may think of not protecting the community, but to continue to protect the community like we should.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jose Mendoza Jr., President for the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1637. First of all, in the national level, we were hoping that eventually our international president, Larry Hanley, does push forward and we get approved, either probably not on this Congress or next Congress, that federal funds also be used for operating. Hopefully that does come in the future, and hopefully we won't have these problems here. As I came before you sometime last year, I said that we were caught in a very unique situation based in the way the RFP was put out and in the award. And now we're in the middle. We're held hostage, the bargaining unit. I say to the commissioners, whatever you decide, fine, there's no problem, we'll deal with it. But we were given a final proposal by Veolia on June 29th, and that was it. The June 30th negotiation date was canceled, so we took it to the members. Right before the vote for ratification, I was approached by Veolia that they wanted to hold on to the vote based on the fact that there was some confusion. There was no confusion. They are the ones that came to us and told us, take it to the members. So we did. We were not confused. We were not, and I reported to you last month that this final proposal was given to us, and in our opinion, it was not in good faith. So we passed that on to the bargaining unit, the members, and they voted on Monday. And they voted to reject the contract. So whatever you decide, we'll still continue to hopefully negotiate a good contract in good faith, and by signing off, TAing each section of the contract, the way it's supposed to be done. And, you know, whoever it might be, we're going to be negotiating. We're going to be negotiating in good faith. And I will say this, though, in closing, hopefully, eventually down the road, we do negotiate a contract with RTC. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Good morning. My name is Tim Collins. I'm the Regional Vice President for Veolia Transportation. Members of the Commission, I'd just like to comment a little bit. I want to thank the folks from Mesquite and Laughlin for their concerns, and I agree with them that it's very important that we find ways to provide the service that they require. Just a little update on our labor negotiations. We have been meeting with the Amalgamated since late December. We have pulled together what we thought in late April was a reasonable offer. We kind of refined that at the end of June, and the union did decide to move that forward to a vote, although they did not have the approval of their executive committee. As we got closer to the vote last week and we saw there was some misunderstanding of the language in the contract, we asked for some additional negotiating sessions, and in fact, we actually pulled back our proposal a day or two before the election. We are now fully prepared to continue with our negotiations with them and drive this offer to a conclusion. I will also say while I'm here that I want to publicly thank all of our employees, as I have thanked them personally many times for their coming out and having the courage to speak in front of the Commission. I think you all know that they have done a great job for the citizens of Las Vegas, for the visitors to Las Vegas. This is a world-class team of mechanics and operators. They do a tremendous job for this community. I realize you have a very difficult public policy decision to make, but these folks back here are folks who want to work for Veolia. They are doing the job, and I think they deserve your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of the Commission. You all know who I am, Jeff Rask, Financial Secretary for ATU. First, I'd like to correct Vice President Tim Collins on the fact that the Executive Board actually rejected the proposal that Veolia came forth along with the negotiating committee, and that's why we brought it forward to the members to vote on it, in which case 88% of those members that voted to reject the contract that Veolia offered. Other than that, I'd like to get into the numbers, specifically the fact that at this time, Veolia is paid $50.70 per service hour on the contract that they're under right now, according to records that I have received. The bid that First Transit put in was an increase over that number by almost 7%. The bid that Veolia put in was close to 16% higher than what they're getting now. Can First Transit accomplish the mission of giving the service to this community at an increase of a little over 7%? I think they can, and I think that they can do it and give us a good contract also. Can Veolia do the same thing with their 16%? Yes, they can. And they can probably give us a lot more, which they haven't offered, but I'm sure that they could come back to the table and offer us quite a bit more. Now, that savings that is incorporated in the difference between the 7% and the 16% amounts to about $49 million over the course of the contract. You, as commissioners, are stewards of the community, and your loyalty belongs to the community and not to the ATU and not to First Transit and not to Veolia. But you have to look at what is best for this community. And what I say to you is what's best is you hired this gentleman, Jacob Snow, to give you a proposal on who would come up with the best bid. And they gave that to you. And they gave that to you with a savings of $49 million over a course of 7 years. And is it incumbent upon you to vote in favor of what Mr. Snow brought forth to you? Yes, it is. All of you need to do what is right for this community, what is right for the outlying communities of Laughlin and Mesquite as well. But first and foremost, you need to look at what is right and what is loyal to this community, and that is to approve what the staff recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Is it still morning? Yeah, good morning. My name is Ellen Brown, and I drive for Veolia Transportation. I'm confused, and I've been to all of these meetings. Everybody is sitting here going, bid on this, bid on this, bid on this, bid on this. They making y'all job complicated as it is. I don't even know why we're here, to be honest with you. I hear people saying what's going on in Mesquite. They weren't here when you guys first made the proposal or whatever was going on. And I'm a little nervous, so it's processing in my brain. But it seemed like everybody backlashing on each other. Just get it over with so we can live our lives. I don't want these people in Mesquite to not have bus service. How many buses y'all got in Mesquite? Y'all got 2 buses in Mesquite? That's it? Wow. Okay, it's just 2 buses in Mesquite. Why y'all just can't add to the buses in Mesquite instead of trying to cut them out and have all these people travel down here and give their, we gonna lose this, we gonna lose that, versus the money. And I don't do politics, and they say don't talk religion, and I see why. It's confusing. But what I'm saying is this, as a community and as y'all the commissioners, just get this over with. No matter who get it or whatever, I don't want us as drivers to lose our jobs. We do have jobs, we have families and all of that, what everybody is saying, but just get it over with. Don't prolong this no more. If you're gonna throw it out and let them start over, then they can add Mesquite to the bid, let them do that. But just make a decision today, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm back. I'm back.
Would you be kind enough to let everybody speak the first time and then come around? Or
I
is this
sure
just
will. I'll
is this
be back.
A quick comment.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Kathy Arntz. My husband is a driver for Veolia. I come before you as not only a family member of an employee, but as a citizen of this community. It scares me, the thought of all these plus some losing jobs at a time when our unemployment rate is so horrible as it is. I also work for the insurance company that supplies Veolia's insurance. And the thought of them losing their insurance is going to have an impact on everybody, as the one gentleman said that sells their insurance. I mean, this is such a trickle-down effect that this is going to have. We're going to have thousands and thousands of people out of a job. Companies that do services for Veolia are going to be out of work. I know where I work, they've been watching this on the news with a fine-tooth comb because we know we're subject to losing a major contract if Veolia loses the bid. What also scares me is my husband's a good driver. He's been driving for over 20 years and never had a preventable accident. In fact, he was recognized in this county commission meeting for that last year. He's 67 years old. If he loses his job, he will not be able to find another job just because of his age. And at this point in time in our lives, we need that, and we need the insurance. I have an illness that we need insurance, and this would be very, very detrimental if we lost that. I just hope you take in consideration not just the politics part of it, but the human factor on how this will impact the citizens of our community and the families of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, good morning. Welcome aboard, sir. I'm Tom Buchdelich. I'm from North Las Vegas. I missed you all last month, but it's good to be back. You've been emailed, called, talked to, but the bottom line is this petition speaks volumes. This petition is in the 90th percentile. This petition took off like wildfire when we heard about the recommendation. These people want to stay with Veolia. I've seen Veolia's offer to us. It's responsible, it's decent. There were some important gains in there. There were some things that probably need a little bit more work, and those are already being worked on. But ATU 1637 had to be goaded by us into showing it to us. That's a fact. The vast majority of us, the greatest majority of us, prefer Veolia as our employer. We want to maintain the teamwork and the relationships that we've forged with our employer. Stand up, team. Stand up. Thank you for the work you do. Let's do it, apples to apples.
Thank you, Tom.
I'm Jean Watkins, and I'm from Mesquite. I heard all the heartfelt things that are being said by everyone from Veolia. I completely understand that. I just want to remind you all that you're not seeing in this hall all the people who can't come because they have to work. They're driving from Bunkerville, all sorts of places around Mesquite on public transportation. We've got local people who have figured out the right way to schedule those buses so these people can get to work and get back, and there's only 2 of them. If they didn't have to work, if the seniors in Mesquite who are working in low-paying jobs because they don't have the money to get by because of their Social Securities, and they're working and they're using the buses, they would be here and they would be telling you the same heartfelt stories that we have. I would not want to be in any of your positions because you have to decide, and there are going to be people who are going to suffer for your decision. What I would say, and I really didn't plan to speak, but I was touched by what the Colonel said when he was talking about the project that you've just finished that went well. And he made a comment saying that his purpose was to take care of people. and to show people that he cared. And you really are going to be in that position today, and you will have to decide what people are you going to care for. I would hope that when you do that, you will decide in terms of all the people in this community, and I'm thinking now about the tie between business and transportation. We have got to provide the widest range of transportation that we can, and it's got to be to the people who will make our businesses work. And it's like a car. You know, if you don't put air in that tire, you're not going to get too far no matter how good your car is. We have a whole bunch of people who are doing low-end jobs, don't have money, rely on this transportation. They are the tires, and we have to watch out for them. They're the ones who are not here. We have to watch out for them because we don't get anywhere if they're not taken care of. You guys got to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Good morning, commissioners and members of the council. My name is Joe Cato, and I am a DBA consultant in the state of Nevada and California. Been here for 20 years. And when this RFP came out, about however long ago, maybe 2 years or so, First Transit, via Terry Murphy, a consultant here in town, contacted me to help with their diversity outreach. That is all I do all day long. I help companies that are here, that are wanting to come to Las Vegas to do business, to help them with their DBE hiring. And that's what, while they do not have a contract, they brought me on board to help them navigate the system in Las Vegas, and that's what I've been doing. While I do understand Veolia's employees and their heartfelt concerns about what First Transit plans to do or is planning to do or may do, I can reassure them that based on the knowledge that I have and their DBE plan throughout the entire country that I have researched, I have no problem in recommending First Transit for this contract. And I would ask that you members of this fine body follow staff recommendation and approve this contract today. We're spending a lot of money for taxpayers' dollars, my dollars. I'm a struggling minority business in this town, and there's a lot of business like me out there. So that said, don't waste any more money. Let's move on. Let's support the contract as recommended by staff, and let's move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. My name is Robert Fuller, also a resident of Mesquite at this time. I just had a couple of different perspectives after listening this morning to share. One, as an objective listener, not understanding the process, it sounds to me like there must have been some kind of a misunderstanding of the RFP and why services to the outlying areas, if they were included in an RFP for a bid, they should have been treated equally. Whoever gets the contract, you're responsible for getting the best deal, but I guess knowing public comment, you can't answer any questions, but rhetorically, were these two contractors given the same request for proposal, and did they both fulfill them equally for the money? A second perspective, I'm newly working for the hospital in Mesquite, and personally have an elderly parent there, and I can attest to the fact that currently these populations have come to rely on the service. And I know in government it's very difficult to make cuts. Someone has to suffer, tough decisions to make, but when you have current services that are relied upon for elderly and economically disadvantaged populations, please take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, my name is Christina, and I'm from Mesquite. I'm deaf, and I also have some handicaps, and I've noticed that there's a lot of people that have a hard time and they wouldn't be able to get to work or get around if they have no bus. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought I was finished until Mr. Jeff Rasky got up here.
Make these comments brief. We
It'll
don't
be
want to
real
start.
brief,
Okay,
real
thank you.
brief. I'm a union member. The contract we just bidded on, I were asked to reject the offer because Veolia had pulled the proposal out. They wanted to offer something more. So we were told to reject the offer. So there's not honest figures because we were asked to reject it
All right.
because Veolia has offered something else.
That's far beyond the scope of item number 41, but thank you. Joe,
One last comment.
it's got to be brief, please.
It's going to be brief,
Thank you.
okay? I read in day before yesterday's newspaper that this whole mishmash is under investigation, according to the news reporter. Now, so no matter which way you vote, believe me, this whole mishmash is under investigation. And I hope to hell everybody's clean. And if there's anybody dirty, I hope to hell they get the full punishment of the law. If you deserve it, go away where you belong. That's in jail. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Farlow?
Thank you. I didn't read any of that stuff. I have a question. Do we have what would they call the last man standing pension plan on this, on the Service Internationals Union? The reason I ask that, because Reason magazine, the issue of February 2011, says that they're underfunded by about $160 billion. So we got a problem.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else wishing to speak for the first time?
I got one comment, man. It really nothing. It's really a comment, and it's being real honest.
Could you
about
state
this.
your name for the record,
Ron
please?
Williams.
Thank you, Ron.
Me personally, with this 50 million thing y'all talking about, me personally, I wouldn't go to the dollar store and buy no 99-cent toilet paper. That's just me. That's all I got to say, man.
Thank you. And I think that comment perhaps is the best way to close the public comment period. All right. And I know that we'll acknowledge it later on, but we, on behalf of the board, we certainly appreciate those that took the time this morning to come up from Laughlin and come down from Mesquite. Understand that tearing up the parking lot this morning was not a way to discourage you from coming to the meeting, so I hope everybody got a parking spot out there. But we do, in all seriousness, appreciate you guys coming down. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We now go to your regular agenda. Item number 1 is to call the meeting to order and approve the agenda. Staff would like to recommend that item 40 be deleted from the agenda.
Entertain a motion? Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. In the interest of time, I'm recommending that we dispense with the general manager's report and go right to our agenda, but it's the pleasure of the board.
Okay. Was there anything of note in your GM report?
We had some clarifications on the Mesquite and Laughlin service, and we can address those as part of item 41 if you like, or we can address them separately as part of the general manager's report. It's the pleasure of the board.
Councilman? Okay.
Very well.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Chairman, we go to your consent agenda, which is made up of items 3 through 39.
Motion on the floor to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next item is item 41, which is to approve an agreement between the RTC and First Transit Incorporated for operation and maintenance of fixed route transit services from the date of notice to proceed through September 30, 2014, with two two-year option periods and authorize the chairman to sign this contract or take other action as appropriate. Now, we're going to go to a brief PowerPoint presentation here, and then we have a video to show you. We were discussing this item in our staff meeting the other day, and Assistant General Manager MJ Maynard made the observation that this agenda item is kind of like having Groundhog Day all over again, in a reference to the movie. And in this movie, Groundhog Day, you have the main character, Bill Murray, plays a bitter, cynical, miserable TV weatherman by the name of Phil Connors. And he gets assigned to go out to a rural community in Pennsylvania to cover Groundhog Day, where they bring the groundhog out, Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, and they see whether or not he's going to see his shadow, and they make a prediction about the weather according to that. And he really did not want to go on that, what he felt, humiliating and miserable assignment. And because of his demeanor and how he treated other people, he pretty much shared his misery with everybody until they got snowed in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, a very severe storm, and then the next morning when he woke up, he had to relive the same day over and over again, and it would not stop. And we kind of have that feeling here at the RTC sometimes when it comes to this item, and we suspect that maybe you do too, because we've had this item or a similar item before you since March of this year, and every month we've been discussing this item. And I don't know about you, and I don't expect any empathy or sympathy from you. It's been difficult for me at times. And the color of my hair has gone completely gray because of this. But sometimes we have a certain sentiment when these things come back before us. We just like to play a little clip for you of how we feel about this item, and then I'll have some other introductory remarks. Well, here we are again, and we understand that the sentiment is there, but we're dealing with the agenda item again. Phil Connors' character, ultimately, he resolves the situation by having a change of heart, and he decides to love those who are around him and share that love with everybody, and then he can get out of that situation. We don't know if there's going to be a change of heart available today or not with regard to this agenda item. There's been votes in the past where the board has been pretty well divided, as you know. But there are some options that you have available to you today, and they're essentially the same options that you had before you back in the May 19th meeting. And I'd like to have RTC General Counsel Zev Kaplan share those options with you.
Commissioners, in your determination today, just as you did back in May, you really have three options. You have the recommendation based upon the procurement process and the evaluation scores, with the number one score being that of First Transit. You could approve that today if you so chose. As you know, now we have some clarity, at least from the Attorney General's office, that it requires 5 votes, regardless of how many of you are here, although we have a full body present today. So it clearly will require 5 votes to take action. Your second alternative would be, if you're not satisfied with that alternative, would be to take the procurement documents, all the submittals from the 2 proponents, and score them yourselves using the evaluation criteria that were set forth in the RFP, and then we'd see what the determination is based on your evaluations. Your third alternative would be to reject all the proposals and direct staff to come back with a reprocurement. So as of today, those would be your 3 options.
And Mr. Kaplan, those are all encompassed in the agenda item as written?
Yes, they would be, because you have the flexibility to either approve it or take other action as deemed appropriate. Those other two actions are permissible actions that would be deemed appropriate.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to have Sandra Stanko, our Director of Transit Services, now come forward. She has a brief presentation she'd like to make about the rural transit services, and there has been much mentioned about that today, and we would agree with much of the sentiment that has been expressed both by the drivers and mechanics with Veolia and by the residents of Mesquite and Laughlin. Let me just say for the record, this is not the first time that transit services in Mesquite and in Laughlin and in Boulder City have been threatened because of a lack of revenue. We've been through recessions before, and those services at one time were operated by Veolia Transportation or their predecessors. And when the services in Mesquite and in Laughlin and in Boulder City were threatened, this board came up with a way to operate those services at a much less expensive rate. And I'm remiss in not informing the board, there's been some discussion about monopolies in the fixed route contract. Veolia is not the operator of the services in Boulder City or Mesquite or in Laughlin. Your contracted operator is the Southern Nevada Transit Coalition. It's a not-for-profit. And they receive a subsidy from this board and from the Nevada Department of Transportation through a federal grant to operate those services. We're faced now where the federal subsidy is being threatened, and we had a meeting on that just yesterday, and those funds could stop flowing after the end of this federal fiscal year, which would be September 30th. And there is legislation that would eliminate those funds as well, and we are concerned about that. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a less expensive way we could continue to operate those services.
Councilman Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jacob, so despite of what's been said about this contract, that is not the reason these items are before us today in regards to the services changing in both Mesquite and Laughlin. Am I correct? This is because of that funding?
Partly correct. We have proceeded forward with a reduction in services in both Mesquite and in Laughlin and to a certain extent Boulder City, and we're doing so because, and that has nothing to do with the item before you here today. It has everything to do with the fact that the revenue to operate these services, because they all operate at a subsidy, is not what it used to be. And our increase in demand on the paratransit side of the equation is up by $9 million. And as you're all aware, we must provide those paratransit rides. We don't have any option. We can't deny any of them. And that has been the bus that has driven these service cuts. However, depending on what action this board takes today, we could be faced with the elimination of all transit services in Laughlin, Mesquite, and in Boulder City. And I'd like to have Sandra Stanko come forward and now clarify that a little bit.
Thank you, Jacob, Chairman Brown, members of the commission. I think, again, I want to thank the folks from Laughlin and Mesquite for coming out. I was out last month for a public comment period with them because right now we're under the public comment period, and that's why folks decided to come out, because they do have a level of service today, and based on the reduction in revenues, there are some service cuts that are planned to take place on October 2nd. The Southern Nevada Transit Coalition Board will meet on September 12th to basically make a determination based on their budget if they can continue to operate the service that they have today, or if in fact they will have to make the reductions. So I want to just kind of briefly go over what is today the level of service and what is planned to take place on October 2nd if in fact they need to reduce their level of service. Today in Laughlin we have what is referred to as a two-loop route that really travels in opposite directions, clockwise and counterclockwise, every hour, basically. We have the 777 that is 24 hours, 7 days a week,
And then we have a route that's referred to as an 888 route that operates 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. The proposed cut for Laughlin is to reduce the service on Route 888. Instead of starting the service at 5:44 in the morning, it would start at 6:44. And the last trip, instead of ending at 11:44, would end at 9:44. Those 3 hours, the period of time, the ridership during those periods is relatively low. And by reducing the service by 3 hours, we hope to actually increase the overall productivity on the Route 777. So the situation in Laughlin, we're looking at 3 hours of service. And as Jacob mentioned, RTC provides the match to the NDOT grant, the Nevada Department of Transportation grant. So with our reduction in match, we had to reduce the service in Laughlin by 3 hours. Unfortunately, Mesquite is a little, not as well, it's a little more glim, I guess. They also have 2 loop routes in Mesquite. The recommendation is to actually eliminate one of those routes, which is the 338, and replace that and make minor modifications on the 333 route, B route, to actually take advantage of the new Grapevine overpass. But there is a small segment of that route that will be eliminated, which is between Grapevine and the Walmart. So that portion of the route will be discontinued. In addition to that, the hours of service will also be reduced. Currently, the route runs until 11:26 in the evening. It would stop, the last trip would be at 9:26. That reduction, again, is due to relatively low ridership during those periods. We have, in some cases, probably less than 2 passengers per loop. The segment of the route that also is proposed to be eliminated is the service to the hospital and also the high school. Now, we realize those destinations are really important destinations, but the ridership for those areas is very low. So what a solution in working with Southern Nevada Transit Coalition and actually the community, we are looking at what's referred to as a deviated fixed route, which means that the passenger on the bus would basically inform the driver that they need to go to the hospital, and the driver would deviate off route to take them to the hospital, and then the passenger would make arrangements for the return trip. So the service will still be available, but it's going to be on a request basis. So it's not part of the regular loop, but it will be still available. As I mentioned, the Southern Nevada Transit Coalition Board will be meeting on September 12th to basically make a determination based on their budget, based on our reduction in match. If they're able to find some other matching funds, then they will be able to continue to maintain the level of service. The challenge is it's very difficult to find those matching dollars. And they will make a vote, and depending on the outcome of that vote, the service changes will take place on October 2nd. I am happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions from the board?
I have a question.
Councilwoman?
Gaming is the predominant industry in Mesquite, and that's a 24-hour industry. So
That
your
is correct.
services are significantly reduced in terms of the hours of operation of getting people to and from work, or would be under the...
That is really the challenge with that service. It appears that we are definitely, people are using transit to get to work. The late hours of that route had very low ridership. Again, less than 2 passengers per hour. So it's possible that maybe other folks they're getting a ride from friends or coworkers, because we're not seeing the riderships in those late hours, and that's why the recommendation was to reduce the service to the last trip starting at 9:26 in the evening. But that is true. Most of the folks that use transit are going to and from work.
Thank you.
Councilman Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these folks going to be able to be heard again then when the coalition meets?
That's correct. It is a public hearing, just like the meeting today, so.
And I want to say something to Phyllis. Phyllis, you said something about our cities and your city and Mesquite and Laughlin. When we sit here as a board, I would like to think we're all one city, and we care about all of you. And I don't want anybody to think otherwise, because we serve the customers of the RTC throughout Southern Nevada, and that's what's important to me. There's got to be a way either to encourage ridership in Laughlin and Mesquite, and I challenge those cities to encourage ridership, but we've also got to find a way that we don't affect or impact these people's lives. It's challenging when you get used to a service and the government says, gosh darn it, we don't have any money, we're going to have to cut that service. We all have to kind of buck up. We've got to find a way, Jacob, and I don't know what the answer is. Tell me, or all of us, why have we entered in that contract with the coalition? Why didn't this go out to, say, First Transit or Veolia or any other provider?
The answer is because the Southern Nevada Transit Coalition can operate the service for much less.
Much less, okay.
That allowed us to justify continuing the
significant.
service.
And I'll just add a little more to that. Because Laughlin, Mesquite, and Boulder City is considered non-urban, we are able to work with the Nevada Department of Transportation and actually get matching funds. So they pay for half of the service, and then the match up to this point has come 100% from the RTC.
Mr. Chair, if I may again, but didn't we also hear that Susan's closing the checkbook? We're not going to get that?
Let me clarify that. It would not be Susan closing the checkbook.
I know, and it's
so
not Susan. I know
need to
Director
defend her. I'm
Martinez, I
sorry.
know that.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment on the match is that we're constantly looking at ways to increase the federal participation of that match to reduce the burden on the local entities for making that match. And so there may be some opportunities there that we're looking to explore and work with as well. It wouldn't be big, but any help that we can look to provide, we're hoping to get
And
as
Mr.
well.
Chair, if I can, one more comment. And Director, thank you for that input, because I didn't want to put all that responsibility on your shoulders, but there's got to be a way amongst all of our local governments to make this work out, one way or another. We've got to figure this out.
Mr. Chairman, I have failed to reiterate the staff recommendation. One of the ways to continue having the resources to operate up in Mesquite and in Laughlin is to work with the local governments there to include some of their in-kind contributions, such as their maintenance facility and the things that they do with bus stops in the city of Mesquite. However, our recommendation for the award of this contract is to award to First Transit because of the cost differential, and that I need to clarify on the record. Per the requirements of the RFP, whoever is the successful proponent in terms of the evaluation is the staff's recommendation, and that's where we are at this point in time.
Mayor Tobler?
What is the subsidy right now that the RTC provides to the rural Southern Nevada Transit Authority?
Are you asking for all together or for Boulder City specifically?
altogether for the
All
rural.
together. Sandy, do you have that information?
I definitely, for Laughlin, it's around $800,000. For Mesquite, it's approximately $400,000. This action is going to reduce the Mesquite probably in half. So you're going from 400 to around 200.
Okay.
That's why the elimination of that one loop and then the reduction of those 2 hours really does cut that in half.
Right. And we have one loop in Boulder City, if I'm correct, just one route. But
That's
we have
correct.
made changes to that route in the past as well to cut back on some of the, and I guess where I'm going with this is I was on the budget committee and we talked about this and the dangers that when we approved the budget, that was with First Transit's proposal. And I'm excited to hear that we don't want to see the rural communities get cut off. But in reality, I mean, we've adopted a budget. So when it comes down to finding dollars, where are we going to look, honestly, Councilman? We're going to look at the lower riderships. Yet the need's still there. And so, you know, I just want to point that out, that we knew this going into it with the Budget Committee and what was recommended to this board, that this was going to be a challenge. So anything that we adopt apart from that budget is going to be a fight for us rural communities to maintain our service. And it's not a threat against Veolia or anything else, or for us to vote against that. It's reality because of the dollar amounts that are in those and what we've adopted in our budget. If I'm speaking incorrectly on this, Mr. Snow, let me know. But I think that's the real concern that a lot of us have. We've already made a lot of adjustments to our routes out in Boulder City and to some of these rural areas. And I want to remind everybody that there's important areas out there too, the Veterans Home. These are things that we're trying to maintain and protect. So, remember what we adopted in the budget, and whatever happens in the future to say that, we got to figure out a way. That's right, we do need to figure out a way, but it's going to take money from somewhere else. So.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Chairman.
Councilwoman?
Yes, I think what we're seeing now is really an example of the new economy that we're facing, and I don't think we're going to see it improving before we see some more challenges of the resources dwindling, and whether it's the increased demands of the paratransit service, and even at the federal level, you monitor the news and you realize that rural Nevada is losing air traffic. I mean, this is something that's something we're facing across the country and across our state. It's not getting better. It's actually becoming more challenging, and we're having to learn how to do more with less. We have less resources, and so the job that we're faced with is not an easy one. We're making difficult decisions in how to spread those resources and to be prudent in our decision-making.
Commissioner June Kiliani?
Thank you. I think with regard to this, I would echo what Deborah is saying, and this is a global economy that we're having an issue with. And in public transportation, unfortunately, it's generally subsidized across the United States. And folks want ridership, we want ridership, but sometimes you got to pay a little bit more, and that's part of the dilemma. I think one thing we've learned through this process, at least I have, is shame on us for building a budget based on a non-contract. I don't think we should ever do that again. We should base a budget. We're not looking for applause up here. I think sometimes through the public process, we learn a few things, and that's always good. But in the long run, because of the timing of everything, that's how it worked out. But I think we can take steps for policy-wise in the future to not have that come. Because what we did is we don't want people threatened or fearful, especially those of you that live in our rural areas. I totally agree. We have to make sure we don't create and especially allow many of our seniors and disabled to be isolated within their communities. You need to make sure that that access is available. And sometimes transportation is the one and only means to do that, including in town. I mean, we have the same kind of circumstance in town as far as that's concerned, where seniors can get isolated in a mobile home park, for heaven's sakes, and can't get to the grocery store. So that said, item 41 right now seems to have caught up the issue of the nonprofit that runs the company for the outlying areas because of the budget process that we entered into. So I would hope that as we continue to debate the question of the First Transit versus Veolia or what we do on that part of it, we don't lose sight that neither of those were the drivers of what occurred. It was how we set the policy to formulate the budget. That said, I want to reserve time to still argue one way or another on item 41, but I do think it's very important. I don't think a person on this board says, I'm only from Clark County, or I'm only from Mesquite. That is not part of our staff. That is not part of this board. We're all Southern Nevadans. Sometimes we've got to fight the North, but that's a whole different story. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Careful with the North thing.
Councilman Hafen?
I just want to thank Sandy and the staff for coming out to Mesquite and Bunkerville and explaining to the people the impact of where we are today. There was some confusion, and being a new member to this board, and I consider us a team. I don't consider Mesquite. Sometimes we maybe get neglected, but that's neither here nor there. We're going to look at it what's best for the folks of Southern Nevada. I think the residents of Mesquite understand that there is going to be a cut. They understood the process, and they understood that it didn't pertain to this item we're going to be discussing. However, regardless of if we took a wrong turn, we're where we're at today because of what the commission agreed to in the past. I wasn't part of that process. We directed Mr. Snow to go forward. No objections. The concern that I have is Mesquite potentially could be cut and left without transit. A lot of other areas could be cut if we don't step back and take a look at this thing. And I would hope, regardless of who this is, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care whether it's Veolia. I don't care whether it's First Transit. I'm not personally involved. I'm not looking at it for who it is. I'm looking at it for what it is. And I think that that's what each one of us need to do. What is going to serve the residents of Clark County, Southern Nevada, the best? We got to weigh everything that was committed in this whole process. And I've heard a lot about apples to apples. I've read the minutes. I've tried to fast track and get up to date so I knew what I was talking about. And I hope I do. And if I'm not, I hope somebody corrects me. I'll stand corrected. However, there was nobody objected to the process before we started the ball game. I've heard reference to ball games here. We knew what the rules were. We knew where the parameters, we knew where out of bounds was. We play the game, and all of a sudden, fourth quarter's over, and we don't like where we're at, and we don't like who maybe won, if you will. All I'm saying is there's some challenges that we need to look past. And I'm going to say this to First Transit, if they're awarded, or Veolia, whoever it is. I would hope there are people that are employed. They have a great track record. They're great people. They're great employees. I would hope that they have first consideration going forward and that they're heard. That's a viable concern that they have, and I appreciate them standing up and voicing that concern. They're doing a great job, and I hope those things will all be considered regardless of what happens and who is the successful provider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilwoman Tarkanian.
First of all, I don't want to get into my ball games. I've had enough of that in my life. Secondly, I grew up rural, so I have a great concern for the rural areas and maintaining services there. Thirdly, I'm looking at the 3 possible decisions our attorney said we had. I don't want to get into scoring myself. So eliminating that, going to the first one, which was giving it to First Transit. First Transit, as I understand, has, their bid is almost identical to what Veolia has now. Is that correct, Jacob? I think I asked you that question before the meeting.
They're very close.
Very close, very close. So we're not talking about millions of dollars difference, we're talking about very close. And then you would have that 2.6 the first year of transition fee that might make that a little different. Is that correct or not?
That's correct.
Okay. Then we get down to the reprocurement. I myself feel very convinced that if we bid again, we're going to get even better offers. So that then brings you to your first year, because we could, what's our situation in our first year? First Transit is the same as Veolia is now, right? Or close to it.
They're very close.
Yes, very close. Now, and if we procure, let's say it takes up to a year to do that, that would give 1 more year to Veolia, right?
That's essentially
At
correct.
the very close price that we would be having with First Transit now.
Very close, yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at if we went to, and I'm talking now on those 3 areas you said we had. I'm eliminating the one of scoring myself, and I'm looking at those 2, and I see for reprocurement, if we did this, if we could do this within a year, we're not losing money.
That's essentially correct, because Veolia has written to us and they have said they would continue to operate the service under their existing contract for the term of 1 year.
Okay. Well, then, I wanted to ask that because I think that's very important. You have to look at the financial aspect. I feel the financial aspect is bettered when we have more competition. And I'll talk more about that later, but I just wanted to say that now.
Mr. Chairman,
thank
can I just, based on what the councilwoman just said, just for clarification so you all understand where we are, the current contract with Veolia would have expired towards the end of September. We have already, there was an opportunity for the RTC to extend that on a month-to-month basis for up to 180 days. That has taken place. So we're really looking at the existing contract potentially expiring the end of March. At that point, we're faced with the issue. Hopefully, we'll be far enough along in a procurement that, as you've heard in the past about concerns about FTA's approval of continuing on. My advice to you is if we are in the procurement process or have already completed it, I don't think there would be a concern with FTA for some short extension period of time to implement any transition that may occur. Obviously, if Veolia were to prevail in the reprocurement, there'd be no transition period. If it is a new contractor or new multiple contractors, which is something that's been potentially discussed, then some reasonable extension to complete the procurement and move forward. I don't think this commission would face any issues with the federal agency, just so you're all aware of that.
Good, thank you. And I know we're going to continue the discussion, but I echo Councilwoman Tarkanian's sense of the third option, or somewhere in one of those three options, that this board take all the information over the last 5 months and rescore it. If anybody wants that, please stand up and pound the desk and we'll move that way, but I don't, and I echo her comments, too far down the road. So essentially, we're going to be looking at the two options. Back to this, Jake, and a lot of great comments made. One of the things I want to express to not only our Boulder City and Laughlin and Mesquite residents, but also to I guess that's a critical leg of our stool, but we have the fixed route, we have the paratransit. And next month, we're going to be faced with some big decisions, policy decisions, as far as the overall paratransit and some of the challenges that's facing. And I would just remind the board that we as the RTC Commission look at those equally. We're not saying one is more important or one is less important. And if there are cuts, and there have been and probably will be in the foreseeable future, they have to be equitable. I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of all the board members, but I, for one, would fight and find the solution to make sure there's always some service in not only our rural communities, but our fixed route and our paratransit. And that, I think that's a core principle that this board is going to support. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that they may lose everything, because I don't think that's an option. There's a lot of solutions out there. Some are going to be decided over the next 60 to 90 days. But I, for one, would not envision a time where we're not serving those people that need our service. And that's certainly how I feel about the rural services. Commissioner.
Thank you. Just procedurally now, so what would you like to proceed with? Do you want us to pose additional questions, or do you want to give time for First Transit and Veolia to make some comments, and then we move back to the board? I just was curious.
And I had asked, thank you, Commissioner, I had asked Jacob and Zev to contact both Veolia and First Transit to see if they wanted to speak today. So I will leave that open. If the firms want to speak, I think 10 minutes is what we discussed. You don't have to. You're not compelled to by any means. But I certainly want to provide that opportunity. And we can flip a coin. I don't see anybody rushing to the mic.
Well, as they're thinking about who's coming first, I would encourage to bring new information from either side. We've sat through this for how long now, how many months now? And as long as they got new information, I'm willing to keep them at 10 minutes and let's go forward.
All right. The offer is out there. The offer has been withdrawn. Senator, do you want me to flip a coin to see who speaks first?
I think that's fair. Flip a coin, whatever's fair.
It's Vegas.
Is the colonel still here? Do we have one of the colonel's coins?
Yeah. As long as one side is heads and one side is tails, Mr. Chairman.
Does any of the board members have?
Dr. Fred, okay.
Now, for the record, this is Councilman March's quarter. Please return it. I will say heads, First Transit will speak first. Tails, Veolia will speak first. I'm going to send it that way, and Jacob, please make sure the cameras pick it up.
We have tails.
Veolia, if you wish to speak, now is the time. Put that back.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Chris Kemper here on behalf of Veolia Transportation. It'll be nice to actually speak today with people wearing the white hats, because I don't think next Wednesday those same white hats are going to be on my side as we discuss Red Rock. So let me make something crystal clear right now. Regardless of what anybody writes, what anybody says, what anybody thinks, what anybody believes, we are not asking you to approve a bid that is $50 million more than another bid, whether that $50 million is over 1 year or 7 years, whatever. Nobody is asking that. I would be crazy to ask you, and you would be crazier to approve it. But what we are respectfully asking is that today you please reject all bids, and you take this process back to the drawing board, where the rules can be better defined, more people can participate, and the playing field can be made level. Now, why is that I say that? Because this was not a lowest price bid. If it were, we wouldn't be discussing this with you. This was a best value bid, not lowest price. In lowest price, it's easy. Whoever has the lowest price wins. In a best value bid, you take technical scores, you weigh those with price, you balance those, you come up with numbers, and you arrive at some figure, and then you assign the winner and the loser. Now, in this particular case, because of that best value, it is important to look at the technical scores, and it is just as important, if not more important, to make sure that the costs that are being provided are fair, reasonable, acceptable, and achievable. And that's why we get to this board quickly. If we can go to the overhead. Can we back that off just a little? Okay. Again, our position is that we need to go back to the drawing board, because there are things that were not done, what we believe, obviously good faith, where no one's suggesting that, but the outcome does not align with that good faith determination. These are the technical scores: 89, 89.8, 89.5, 89.8, and a 79. So of the 4 technical scores that were given to Veolia, one of them is 10 points lower than the average. So 3 people determined that Veolia should get nearly 90s in each case, and one not even 80. Conversely, with First Transit, 3 people, 78.8, 78.8, 81.3, and then a 93, 13 points higher than the average of these 3. Now, someone will say, well, that's the system. Who cares? Why are those scores so important? Well, the reason they're so important is because you made them important. When you made this a best value bid and not a lowest price bid, these scores became critical. And what we find out is it's this score and this score that result in First Transit winning this bid. Because if these scores go away, or they're averaged, or you take the high and the low, any combination, and Veolia wins this contract, because the technical scores, when taken in conjunction with the dollar scores, then award that to Veolia. Again, I'm not here asking that you do that, please. I'm not asking that you award this contract to Veolia, but this is one of those things that needs to be addressed the next time you do this. so that you don't have 2 out of 8 scores making the determination. We just learned that you as a board can't do anything unless there's 5 of you that say it's okay. And in this particular case, 2 out of the 8 scores determined who would win this. So that is the first issue. Now, there was a suggestion that, and I've heard that, and it's been expressed honestly by some of you, that Veolia's bid was too high, and that's why they lost. Well, let's look at Veolia's bid. It really is just 2.14% above the current rate. And it's only there because there was no rate increase since July of 2009. We are in honest labor negotiations on a collective bargaining agreement that we are confident we're going to arrive soon at a conclusion. And that collective bargaining agreement is going to provide for increase in wages. Also, healthcare costs have double-digit increases. And the majority of the fleet is coming off warranty. So that means parts and labor and repair of those vehicles is going to increase substantially. And finally, Veolia now maintains or pays utilities on the Sunset facility, which it didn't have to do previously. The only point of this is Veolia is not raping the RTC with a price that is substantially higher than what they offered before. Now, First Transit's bid, as was mentioned, is right at, is just slightly below the current rate. But how did it get there? You've heard First Transit say that that their bid, is appropriate based on what they're doing, and we've heard things about paying wages and benefits that are comparable, but when you really analyze it, they're paying 24% less for benefits, 9.6% in drivers' wages. Now, with maintenance and parts going through the roof, they're paying 27% less in parts and lubricants than we are. Now, how does that occur? And you heard them say, well, we get oil at a great price from a previous hearing or whatever, but I don't believe they took that into consideration. And they pay 95% more in subcontracting costs. So, with wages and health benefits being as they are, with many buses coming out of warranty, how do they get there? Well, we showed you how they get there. And at the same time, Veolia, in its bid, must make allowances because it's dealing with the union. It must make allowance for upward expenses relating to wages and benefits. Now, we have told you that when you hear this $50 million figure, $37 million approximately over this 5 years relates to wages and benefits. Now, we don't know how that works. If First is not required to consider a collective bargaining agreement, and we are, but we think it's only fair that everybody pay the same wages and benefits to these drivers. Commissioner June Kiliani's point was very well taken. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take some time? Why don't we say, you've just heard Jacob say that Veolia has agreed to continue this while we work this out. Why don't we find out what we are going to pay these incredible men and women who drive these buses and service these buses? Why don't we find out what we're going to have to pay them, and then we bid on the same thing? And that's the apples to apples that you've heard people talk about. Because it isn't fair to say to Veolia, you bid on a contract with a collective bargaining agreement. And First Transit, you can say that you bid on a collective bargaining or will or you'll honor this or that, but you're not obligated to, and we are. Let's get those wages and benefits defined. Let's then proceed to bid on the same thing. Now, the other point, and again, this gets back to the best value bid. The figures that were on this board were there is a $19.4 million difference between Veolia and First Transit. For 3 years, 19.4. A good deal of that is wages and benefits, as I just mentioned. But here's what's imperative to comprehend, and I apologize that if I don't convey it properly, it's my fault. Veolia's contract is here. 19.4 lower is First Transit here. Because of technical scores, Veolia won the technical scores, but only by 5 points or so. Because of this difference, First Transit wins. 19.4 makes them win. Now, if that 19.4 is not real, and it's more like 8 million or 4.2 million, First Transit doesn't win. Veolia wins, even though First Transit still has lower numbers, Veolia wins because their technical scores are so much greater. And I didn't make those numbers up. The 8 million and the 4.2, those are figures contained in Mr. Aguero's report, your consultant, who made this conclusionary statement that I'd love to read to you. First Transit's proposal relies on ambitious efficiency assumptions, including without limitations those that may reduce total compensation to employees covered by a collective bargaining agreement. From an analysis standpoint, we believe there is a material degree of uncertainty relative to whether these savings can be achieved. Your consultant then goes on to say, with regard to the savings that are apparently going to be on salaries and wages, these savings, quote, will ultimately be subject to future negotiations with labor. And then payroll taxes and fringe benefits. The expectation is that benefits would also be subject to future negotiations with labor. What is that saying? It's saying that we have to comply with the collective bargaining agreement, but First Transit doesn't. And in order to reach the savings they have to reach to win this bid, they have to negotiate reductions with the union. I don't think that's right, and I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's a level playing field. And then when you get to vehicle maintenance, Mr. Aguero finds, while there may be room for additional efficiencies, First Transit may ultimately find it challenging to achieve the level of cost savings assumed. So, in other words, there are other factors beyond First's control that in all likelihood will make it, if not impractical, impossible for First to reach its number. And why is that important? And this is what I need to properly convey to you. Why is that important? Because you made it important. When you made this a best value contract, you said cost here has to be achievable. Because if it's not achievable, I'll just make up a number. And what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I'm going to lose on the technical side, but what I'll do is I'll make a number so low that I'll win. And then somebody else in that same board of directors meeting says, Mr. Kempfer, are you crazy? Because we won't achieve those savings. We're really here. We're not here, we're here. Veolia may be here, but we can't be there. And my response, who cares? We win. And if we don't make the same money that we think we're going to make, so what? But if we give an accurate figure that's here, we'll lose. Because it's not based on dollars, it's based on value. And when it comes to technical scores, we don't beat Veolia. So we have to be lower, perhaps even lower than we can ever hope to be in order to win this contract. And it's not enough to say, well, they'll have to honor it. They'll have to honor that contract. That's not why you set it up that way. Yes, they will have to honor it. But in the meantime, they're honoring a number that they can't achieve and reasonably is unachievable. So you set up a system where you've created numbers that Veolia, even though it would win if the number is really where it's at in terms of First Transit's expenses, if First Transit can't get there, so what? They win the bid. That, we think, is unfair.
Mr. Kemfer, are you winding down?
I'm winding, well, it sounded like I was winding up, so, anyway, yes, I am I'm winding down. There's just a couple other brief points. We were not allowed to take into consideration, and the question was asked about the demobilization and mobilization cost. In this particular proposal, we were not allowed to consider the fact that first we'll take $2.5 million or $2.6 million to mobilize, and you're going to have to pay some figure, probably around $500,000 to Veolia to not mobilize. And the rationale from Jacob, which is absolutely spot on, is that's unfair to somebody who's not an incumbent. And that's right. But at the same time, this particular bid allowed them to consider the fact that they're the present paratransit contractor. And they were allowed to say, oh, we're going to save $400,000 because we have both contracts. So there's another $400,000 a year because they have the contract. And that number is probably way low. Our figure is that the number is probably more like millions of dollars. But that's not the point. The point is that's another flaw. Don't allow somebody who has a paratransit contract to be able to use the expenses they save if they get this one and then have both, and we can't use an expense that obviously is incurred if we don't get the contract. Now, one final point. What is lost by taking the time to do this and do it right? Veolia's contract, as you heard, has already been extended for 6 months. We'll extend it for whatever you want to make sure that services are properly maintained. You will not be paying a dime more than you are doing now. I'm just asking you to please take the time, answer all the questions, make sure whoever wins pays the same wages and benefits to their employees regardless of the contract. Can you imagine how it must feel to be sitting out there and wondering if your wages or benefits are going to stay here, go up, go down, or what, depending on who wins this contract? That's insane to put those people in that position. They shouldn't have to be put in that position. I'm asking you, please don't. Let's decide what they're going to be paid, and let's bid on that so that the playing field is level. Important points about these rural routes. Why isn't that in the bid proposal? Why isn't that then made a condition that these kinds of routes are looked at and maintained and bid on and allowances made for? Why wouldn't you want to try to do that?
All right, Mr. Kemfer, I'm going to have to ask you to...
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm just saying, please, if you could.
Mr. Joseph, 90 seconds, because we're approaching the 20-minute mark.
The other thing, Mr. Brown, I assume that everything else that was previously submitted to the RTC and the hearing documents, are all part of this hearing. Is that correct?
Zev, let's put that on the record that although the Attorney General ruled that and this board acted on voiding the vote, that all the public records that have been made over the last 4 or 5 months are still active?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that changed was the actual vote, but the subject matter, the hearing process, all those documents are still part of the same public record as it relates to this matter. And in fact, they were all presented because we had 2 commissioners that weren't present at that May meeting. They were all members of the board were given all the documentation so that they've had that to review.
Okay, and then that would include also documentations that we provided to you outside the hearing.
That's
right?
correct. Everything that
All
has
right.
been submitted to myself or the RTC,
Okay.
independent of the board members, has been made a part of that entire record.
All right, thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. Respectfully, Mr. Joseph, very quick.
I took too long. I'm sorry.
Okay. Chairman Brown and members of the commission, I will be very brief. It has been an honor and privilege to serve you for the past 19 years, and we have won many, many bids during the course of that 19 years, and we've always done it on the basis of winning fair and square, and that's how we want to do it today. We believe that our proposal is the best and the best price and the best value, but we agree with Commissioner Tarkanian, and a question that Commissioner Marsh had asked the last meeting was, what's the difference? Where's this price coming from? There are 2 opportunities really as you look at this. One is you have the right to audit our books and to see everything, all of our costs, is a completely transparent approach. So you can take the time to audit our books and know what the costs actually are, because we know what those costs are. The second is that in terms of the future proposal, there is an opportunity to save more money. We proposed to invest $6 million and to guarantee $14 million of additional revenues through ridership increases that would pay for all of this service to Mesquite and elsewhere, because this is a jewel, and that ridership on the Strip can be grown and more revenues can be captured, and we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. In the meantime, while you consider that, we absolutely will honor our current price for the duration of the time you need to rebid it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bryan, you have you and your client have a liberal 20 minutes plus.
I appreciate that. We will be conservative and take a conservative 20 minutes plus, if that's agreeable to you. Mr. Chairman, for the record, Richard Bryan, Lionel Sawyer, and Collins, on behalf of the applicant here, First Transit. And let me just say that Councilman Hafen may be the newest member on this commission, but understand Mr. Kempfer is an extraordinarily articulate, effective advocate. He's always been my choice if I had an issue that I'd like to have before him. But understand what he's doing. In effect, he's saying, look, throw out the entire process. We don't like the result. We didn't get the recommendation, so let's throw out the process. And as Councilman Hafen pointed out, everybody knew what the rules were going in. Here's what you're expected to do. There's been some reference we're going to get enhanced ridership of that. That should have been factored into their proposal. That should have been factored into their proposal. Now, you contacted Mr. Aguero. The $49 million is not something that was fantasized by First Transit. That's what your experts have said, that in effect over the 7-year period of time, it's $49 million more if you go with Veolia. It roughly amounts to about $7 million a year. Now, there's been a lot of talk here. We've got to find money to take care of the good folks out in Mesquite and Boulder City and Laughlin, some of these impacted areas. Understand that you're working with a finite amount of dollars. A finite amount of dollars. These are no ordinary times. Each and every one of you, in the capacity that you serve as a member of a commission or a council, have had to make substantial cuts and reductions. And this commission has already made those reductions. And indeed, if you go with the proposal that Veolia offered, you've heard Mr. Snow indicate 100,000 less service hours, 42 million non-casino corridor rides that would be reduced by about 7%. That's $2.9 million. There's a whole host of consequences that are attached to that decision. So at this point, Veolia understands they can't win that game because, frankly, we have submitted not only the least expensive, but the best proposal. Now, in framing the RFP, you made a determination as a commission that we would weight cost at 55%. That is not an unusual thing. Those of us that are involved in some airport negotiations on some new contracts out there, the airport has told us price is going to be terribly significant, and it's going to be significant because you all face enormous budget constraints. Enormous budget constraints. So I must say, in terms of a compelling public policy, I'm not here to speak to you as a policy guru, but I've had some experience in my private life with public policy. I do not understand what the public policy argument is to reject the proposal that First Transit has been made, which Mr. Aguero, and he's been cited here frequently, First Transit remains the lower cost service provider even when startup cost and speculative and innovative elements of the proposal are considered, period. And when asked to compare the costs that are included in these assumptions, the operating cost estimates provided by both Veolia and First Transit do not appear inconsistent with either historical experience or comparable market data. I think it's all pretty clear what's happened. These are two world-class companies, no question about it. Veolia's had the contract since 1993. A little complacency works in. All of a sudden, a new company comes in and makes a proposal with some creative mechanisms, with some cost-saving provisions, and all of a sudden, Veolia finds themselves before you with a $49 million 7-year differential, a $7 million annual, and now they say, let's throw out the contract. Now remember what we heard initially. All of you were heavily lobbied on this. We were told First Transit can't do it. Can't be done. Can't be done. Those kind of costs just cannot be done. I might just indicate parenthetically that Veolia has done the very same thing at First Transit in a contract in Nassau County in New York. Their proposal, which was accepted, was 30% less than the existing contract. So all of these increased ridership and innovative things they've promised, they obviously did not include in their proposal, and they find themselves substantially higher. Now, what I don't quite understand, we're told, our numbers can't do it, and at the same time it's suggested to you that, look, let us continue to operate that contract, and we can do it for the same price. I don't understand that. You can't have it both ways. Now, with respect to the employees, I understand their concerns. And by the way, every single employee that works for Veolia, if we get will be given an offer to work with us. Now, the uncertainty of the collective bargaining agreement arrangement, since last December, Veolia has not had a collective bargaining agreement with this unit. Now, at the last minute, they say it would be unfair to have a contract awarded because we don't have an agreement. Veolia was the one that had the contract and had the negotiating opportunity. What happened over that period of time? Now at the last minute, in an effort to get you to throw out a process that probably has cost you $600,000, you're told to throw out the process. Throw it out. May I respectfully suggest that there is a precedent here. In effect, you're asking companies to come in and to bid when there is an existing service provider. What kind of message are we sending? Another company, a good company like First Transit, comes in and they come with a proposal that's substantially less costly to you, with a quality product, serving hundreds of contracts across the country, a $10 billion company who frankly believes that they can do it, and as Mr. Aguero has indicated, that a substantial part of the price differential is that First Transit is prepared to accept lower profits. I would think you might want to ask yourself, have we been paying too much over the years? Just because a new company comes in and says, look, we can do it for less, does not necessarily mean that we cannot provide the level of service that has been suggested. So I'm a little confused. We can't do it because of our price, but they can do it at our price, so let it be continued. The cost of going out for a new proposal takes you maybe a year, year and a half. I mean, Mr. Snow has talked to previously about the length of time it takes for a process to be put in place, an RFP. So in effect, Veolia continues to provide that service. Is there a shadow of doubt in your mind that if a year and a half from now, a bid comes in that's lower than what Veolia is proposing, that we're not going to go through the same thing again? There's no guarantee that you're going to get anything less expensive. And what we've offered is firm, it's fair, we're qualified to do the work, and all we're saying, give us the opportunity to do so, and we believe, moreover, with respect to the employees, we can provide an increase in the first year of the contract, 3%. Now, even if you think we're wrong, don't we in a free enterprise system that all of us believe in, that with a company with the kind of net worth that we've got, even if we're wrong, we are bound by the terms of the provision, and it would be our loss. We're making this proposal because we believe we can do it and still make money, admittedly, less money than Veolia. So I would urge you to do what I think is the responsible public policy decision, and that is to award the contract that your staff, who's been involved in this for decades, has urged you to do, because it's less expensive, provides a quality service, and it seems to me that's the essence of what a request for a proposal ought to be. Not to say at the end of the game, we don't like it, let's throw it all out, we should do it differently.
Thank you, Senator.
Commissioners, hello. I'm Brad Thomas. I'm the president of First Transit. I would agree. This is, I think, the 6th meeting that I've been here for this. But I do want to tell you, I'm as excited today, and I'm as encouraged today, and I'm as enthusiastic about providing this service as I was from the beginning. I believe in it as strongly today as I did from the beginning. I know we put the best proposal we could put together for this. I know we can do this proposal. I've signed this contract. We're committed to this. Your staff, who did a fantastic job from soup to nuts, beginning to end, they recommended us. You had an independent economics committee. He recommended us. We're talking about what amounts to about a 7.5% difference in price. Now, the numbers are big because it's a big contract. But as the senator just said, Veolia themselves have just bid 30% less in Nassau County, New York. So is it that they can do that, but we somehow can't do 7%? How are we to believe that? I look at the opportunity in front of us, and I just think that it would be a terrible mistake to throw away the procurement and all of the time and energy that has gone into this, when I know it's the right thing to do. I know that that we can do this contract. I know that we can do it for the price that we said we could do it for. Now, we're now being asked to look at possibly an extension, throw it out. Well, you know what? If I was on their side, I'd say the same thing. I didn't win. Throw it out. Let's do it again. Give us another shot. And to Commissioner Tarkanian's point, maybe you'll get better prices. But how is that possible? We've been told over and over again that it can't be done for anything less than what Veolia has told you. So how can it be both ways? Either it can or it can't be done for the price. I'm telling you it can. I think they're now confirming that it can. But yet, they want another bite at the apple. You know what? If I were in their shoes, I'd want another bite at the apple. It doesn't work that way. It shouldn't work that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, Bruce Woodbury, representing First Transit. If I could take just a couple more minutes of your valuable time. My first observation, based upon my experience, my past experience in these matters, is that it's difficult to understand how we could possibly come to what in effect has been a stalemate, no decision, after a year-long process in what I believe the Federal Transit Administration has described as a model procurement, which resulted in a very strong, decisive recommendation following a clear evaluation process to award the contract, which will save you $7 million a year and thereby avoid the service cutbacks to essential bus routes and layoffs which will otherwise be required. Now, forgive me for saying, but it appears that some members of the board have determined that no contract is going to be awarded at this time unless Veolia is somehow the winner, and that we're going to re-procure until that happens. Now, with all due respect, none of the objections that have been raised to awarding the contract to First Transit are pertinent to the criteria established by the RFP which this board approved. And when I was a member of this board, I was always advised in very strong terms that unless I am willing to rescore, reevaluate as a board, that objections of those kind cannot withstand a legal challenge. You've rejected the option to rescore. We heard that again today. Veolia has indicated through Mr. Kempfer that they're not asking you to award the contract to Veolia today. To do that, you would have to rescore. Now, my friend, Mr. Kempfer, is basically asking you to do an off-the-record rescoring in your minds and justify a reprocurement. You simply can't do that. You've got to make a decision one way or the other. Veolia is a strong company. They're a good company. They've generally served you well over the years. And they've been well compensated for that effort. But any kind of established relationship or feeling of allegiance should simply not be allowed to override the overwhelming public interest in preserving $50 million worth of vital public services and the jobs of the persons who provide those services. Now that Veolia lost out in the evaluation process, there's been talk about reprocurement. There's been talk about possibly splitting the system into two distinct contracts, two geographic areas. However, you approved an RFP for one contract, and based upon that approval, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent by the RTC, by Veolia, by First Transit. If you combine it, you're in the millions of dollars that have been spent on this process. And a decision is required on this RFP as it was established by you. Now, as I understand the framework of this contract, you're only committing yourself for 3 years. You have the right to exercise options for additional years beyond that. But you are committing yourself for 3 years. If you decide to explore the possibility of dividing the future services, as Mr. Snow has talked about from time to time in the past, and as some of you have talked about more recently, it's going to take some time. It will take many, many months to evaluate that, to plan it, to prepare for it, and then to create an RFP or maybe multiple RFPs. And as you've seen, that process, again, will take many, many months beyond. If you award this contract, as has been recommended, that will give you the appropriate time. In 2 years or so from now, you can then decide whether to start a process to consider exercising your option with First Transit, or you can determine that you want to go forward with a new RFP or 2 RFPs to create a divided system. I can't stand before you and tell you I know which way to go, whether that would be beneficial or not beneficial. But I do know, and I think you all know, that it will take a considerable period of time to do that properly if you're going to consider doing it. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please just make a decision and break this unfortunate stalemate. A vote to simply reprocure, which is your only other option, than to award it to First Transit, is simply a decision to keep the process going until Veolia somehow comes out on top in the evaluation process. Please trust your staff. Follow your own established RFP criteria. Save all of that money. Preserve those jobs, those bus routes. And then take the time, the necessary time, to plan for the future of this system in a way that you should. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Woodbury.
At this point, the staff recommendation is to award to First Transit.
Okay. All right, open up for some comments or questions. Commissioner June Kiliani?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you wish to accept it, but I'd like to put a motion out there that we can debate one way or another, and it would be to reject staff's recommendation with no disrespect, and direct that staff pre-bid, look at splitting the contracts. It doesn't have to even just be in two, but take a look at how that would be, and that the bidding be submitted and brought back to this board within a year. Included in that, I would suggest that we continue with the, both Veolia, I'd ask them to continue with their extension of their contract as permitted, as well as First Transit on the paratransit component, because I believe that's coming up as well. That would then give us time to fully vet the issue. So I would throw that out there as a motion, Mr. Chair, if there's a second, and then I would like to speak to it.
Okay. We'll leave that motion at the time. Councilman Eliason?
And it's not in regards to the motion, it's just some thought process that I've been going through, as I said here. We throw it out to rebidding. What guarantees us we're not going to be in the same predicament 18 months from now or 2 years from now? I mean, because if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, both sides agreed to this procedure that we went through.
There were no objections as part of the process. There are no guarantees that if we reprocure that we aren't in a similar situation to where we are now, that I'm aware of. I don't think we can give you any guarantees in that regard.
Well, I guess that's the dilemma. I sit here as a commissioner of this board and have that mind thought. We sat here, went through how many meetings, and I'm grateful my employers is willing to let me have some time off, because this has happened 6 times now. And I guess that's where I sit, and I think, is we could be in this predicament a year from now. And it's very unfortunate that we sit here and wonder that, but we thought this one was fine. FTA approved it, thought it was a model procurement process. And now we're sitting here debating that process and looking at our staff and figuring out what to do next. I don't know, it's a real odd position to be in, I guess, with no guarantees of the different things.
Thank you. Councilman Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner June Kiliani. I can second that, and I'll be specific as to why. I read earlier today in the paper that I favored Veolia, and I want to make it clear to everyone here and watching. I don't favor Veolia, and I don't favor First Transit. I do favor our customers at the Regional Transportation Commission and our employees that do such a great job for us. That's what I support, and that's what I favor. I've said it since this nightmare began. This isn't right. Both companies have incredible representation, by the way. You've got the very best in the world, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to your representation. And you're probably both great companies. But coming from the construction industry, when I see a bid up here and I see a bid down here, something's missing. And you might be right on the money with both numbers. You might be absolutely correct. That's what it's going to cost to run this, run our transit system. I don't know that, and I'm not comfortable with it. And until I am comfortable with it, for the benefit of our customers, not for the benefit of a company, I'm going to support Commissioner June Kiliani's motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilwoman March?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions for Jacob. This, just to clarify, this is a fixed bid process, and that what that means is that regardless, the company that's selected must deliver on that price point that they.
That's correct.
Okay, and so the difference between the Veolia bid and the First Transit bid is essentially 7.5%, but because of the size of the contract, the size of the bid, it looks like $50 million over 7 years, but it's really 7.5%, which is really a pretty reasonable variance amount on most bids. 7.5%, that's not an uncommon.
That's not uncommon.
Okay. What was the cost of procurement when we went through this whole process, if you were to tell us what this process has cost us thus far today?
We haven't gone through and done an extensive analysis of what the cost is. Senator Bryan floated a figure. I think he's probably fairly close in that figure in terms of staff time over now what is well over a year, and in the use of the consultants that we've provided and the attorneys and the outside counsel. I'd say we're close to $500,000 or so.
And then what, if we were to re-procure and go through a process and look at cost and time, what would that cost and what would that timeline look like?
It would depend upon what type of procurement that we do. If we decide to go away from a value-based procurement and just have it all based on cost, we don't have to involve the technical evaluators, and we could cut down a couple of months, 2 to 3 months maybe from the time frame. If we decide to continue to do with a value procurement, it's going to add some time to that. And I would say if we go with a cost-based approach, we could probably do that in 6 months or so. If we do a value-based procurement, it's going to take 2 or 3 months longer.
Okay. And I'm curious, why Veolia didn't, Lois had suggested that we could go out to a re-procurement and that we could get a better price. I'm concerned that Veolia should have come in with their best price at the time that they bid this process. I guess the thing that I'm struggling with is, for all of us, it would be safe for us to go and rebid this as elected officials, but safe isn't necessarily right. And that's the frustration that I see. I think that, yes, we could do the safe thing and go out, but I think that the right thing is to look at the lowest bid. So.
Mr. Chairman, could I just answer the comment that she had made? My comment was not made in support of Veolia. My comment was made in my belief in public policy, which is to avoid monopolies. That's why it was made, and it didn't matter who was involved or what the situation is. I just feel we have a tremendous opportunity here to get to a situation where we can avoid the monopoly, and that's what we have. And Jacob has in the past brought forward avoiding monopolies, and paratransit was moved off for that reason. But it's my understanding we still have the largest transit operation in the country that has only one private partner, even with that cutoff. And I think that the trend nationally is to move away from that. I saw it as I was doing research. I saw Austin, Texas, and Denver, and Phoenix, and Long Island that have moved towards having more than one person bid. And that's why I feel we'll get better bids, because I believe if we move it into more than one partner, that we will have a greater competition, which will result. And I think that's what our country is about, and I just believe very strongly in that.
And I agree.
I just want to tell you, I have great respect for First Transit and the presentation.
And I agree and support what you're saying. However, we should have told First Transit that at the beginning of the process, that because they had the other contract, that they would not be in a position to be able to bid this. They did bid this, and that's the concern that I have, is that they are now in a position where they have the lowest bid. Now, my question is, are there two arms to First Transit? Do they have a paratransit arm so that you have essentially two entities that would be operating, or will this be one organization operating? And then could we reconsider this in 3 years too? Because we're talking about a 3-year contract with two-year extensions. Maybe at the end of 3 years we decide that okay, now we want to look at this and we want to see. Maybe whoever comes in would have to create a separate entity, whether it's Veolia or First Transit or whatever, that they couldn't bid it as the same company as, so that you have some competition.
If I might just say, it's Veolia and First Transit and another company that are represented in 2 of the 4 places I mentioned you. So they were able to do that, and they seem to have done it well.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Tobler.
If we go out for re-procurement, that doesn't remove the monopoly issue, unless we divide the contract up, which I know is part of the motion. But I go back to what Councilmember Marsh is talking about, and I know it may appear to be the safe route, but I think there's some dangers in going back out. I think we are now telling everybody that the integrity of our process has been damaged to some point, that we want to review everything again, and then there is no guarantees that it will resolve any of the issues down the road. So I think it actually presents some other dangers by going out with that process. Ultimately, what happens if we tie vote on I mean, if we split the vote on both issues, where do we stand then, Jacob? I mean, where do you go after that? Where we can't let it go out for procurement and we can't award the contract?
We'd have Groundhog Day all over again
Every
next
time.
month.
Okay. Here's just some other issues that, once again, if we really put our communities first, and, I understand what Mr. Kempfer's arguments, and he made some very good arguments, and there are some things that he brought up that I probably didn't weigh as heavily before that I think are some issues now, but, the issue is it's a less money for a contract. And I'll tell you what, when we start looking at areas to cut, those of you that have stepped up and said we shouldn't remove the rural areas from this, we're going to hold you to that because we're going to be the first ones looked at because of ridership. And that's really the fairest approach to look at this. I mean, it's hard for me to argue for our services if our riderships are a lot lower. And we're going to have to hold you to that somehow. But I think our main responsibility is to our communities. This is $50 million, and even if you wanted to discount that down, I'm okay with that, but it's still significant savings between the two contracts. The other issue, and it kind of escaped my mind for a minute, as we look at these contracts again, I guess I'm just very concerned with the process of moving forward, just repeating the whole thing over again. You said Groundhog's Day. This whole process could be a Groundhog Day over and over again, not just if we don't reach to some conclusion today with reprocurement. I mean, we can end up the same way. And, we've expected our employees and all of our entities to give up something in negotiations and everything else. We've been through this argument with our own communities, and now I don't think it's fair, and I understand your comment about the budget, Commissioner, but I don't think our budget should be determined by negotiations done through third parties either. And I think that's something else that we have to take into account when we look at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Hafen? Commissioner?
I want to speak to why I made the motion. I've always tried to approach, I think actually this has been the best part of public policy. We've aired our dirty laundry and clean laundry publicly for many, many months, and that's okay. I don't think I've heard a single person appear before us that has trashed either First Transit or Veolia. I think we've got two good partners out there. But I do think, and for folks that know me, I'm not afraid to do much of anything. I teach middle school special ed kids, so I don't take a safe way out. I don't consider the reprocurement a safe way out. I consider it doing the right thing on behalf of the public to make sure that we can get to a win-win. And the win-win mean no more, we're not into applause, folks. Win-win means that we have to do our due diligence. Time is our enemy, but it's also our friend. And if it means we got to take more time to do something right, if there's enough questions that are out there that are not answered, then I think we have a moral obligation and responsibility as elected officials to make sure that we answer those questions. So I've got a couple I'm going to pose, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, and then I have a couple comments to add why where my thought process is. The current Veolia contract has been in place for how long?
The current contract, I believe 3 years.
Okay, and then prior to that?
Similar time frame.
Okay, so we did 3-year bundles, so to speak, of contracts.
It's usually been 3 or 4 years.
Okay, each time.
Actually, there's only been 3 procurements in the 18 or 19 years.
Okay, that was going to go to my question. Did we bid on every time that we did it, or we just sometimes extend the contract because we like the business and the way it was going?
During the strike, we extended the contract, and we extended several other times.
Yeah, there were some option periods that were exercised. There were some unique circumstances with the strike, or
Right.
threatened strike, and we went to the FTA and got their consent to extend it.
Okay, so we've got flexibility that are there, but I think it's important to note, how did we even get here today? Why did we decide to bid this time around?
The contract was at its end. There were no other options to execute. And there, in the past and going forward, the Federal Transit Administration, since there are federal funds involved in this contract, will not allow us to indefinitely keep the same contract.
Which is reasonable and actually is not the better part of public policy, which we sometimes forget because we're looking at this in the county. We do 1 or 3 year contracts, and then we give them 5 extensions or 4 years each. And it's like, well, you never come back then and revisit that. So that's not good public policy. So I do think the federal government is right on that. I don't think the integrity of the process is at risk because we rejected the recommendation from Veolia about the protest of the scoring and such. So I think as a commission, we heard it, we listened to the protest, and we said, thank you very much, but we don't agree with you on that. And that was the decision that was made. In hindsight, I don't know whether or not we should have done a 45-55, a 22-44-61, whatever that split should have been. But you know what? Now we know to question more when we do RFPs about how we want to score. Whether we want low bidder or low and responsible bidder. And that's a very key piece. We find that in our construction jobs a lot. Just because you give me the best bang for the buck doesn't mean you're going to get me the best service. And so in the long run, that's got to be part of the decision that we made. So some of the reasons I made the decisions, and this is really no different than the motion that we voted on before. Some people were up here saying as if it was new. Actually, at the May meeting, Councilman Ross made the motion to split and go back to re-procurement. So this is not something that's been new. We've actually had that. We lost it by a 4-3 vote, and then subsequently we found we had to have 5 votes in order to take any kind of action. So this was not a new concept that was out there. It's actually something that we vetted before. In addition to that, as I go back through, and I'm crazy, I save all my little notes, I start looking between Jeremy Aguero and Guy Hobbs's articles, and that they were chosen by RTC to kind of do an analysis, and another one by Veolia and another one by First Transit. God bless them, they're numbers people, but they use consistently. They appear to be feasible numbers. The review is reasonable for us to be able to assume. In the long run, it still comes down to whether or not we truly believe one number versus another set of numbers. Anything can be reasonable, anything can be appear to be feasible, but in the long run, part of our job is to make sure that we dig down and do the best job that we can to figure out what the best bid was as well as the service that's there. So then I go back to 2 components, and I believe either company can do this well, but I do think I don't believe in a monopoly, and I do believe that we should be splitting contracts in a variety of ways. And I think even in government, we should be looking at RFPs so we get more women and minority-owned businesses, period, to be able to bid on things. We tend to write them for only the large conglomerates in the long run. But if I look back at applied analysis concepts, salaries and wages come up as well as maintenance. Vehicle maintenance. The proposal by First Transit cost of fleet maintenance is substantially lower than that proposed by Veolia. That gives me concern because our fleet is going off warranty. We have to make sure the public paid for those, and we have to make sure that we maintain that. That just calls into question. It doesn't mean one was right or one was wrong, but it causes, in my mind, maybe we haven't flushed this well enough. Maybe we really don't know what the true numbers are going to be. Then I look at salaries and wages and subcontracting costs, $3.6 million higher in subcontracting costs than Veolia. Where do you make up 7.5%, or i.e. $50 million over a 7-year period? Where you make that up are the 2 places you can go, and that's employees or wages and benefits. I don't believe First Transit wants to do that. They've got good collective bargaining agreements in other states and other places. However, without one in place and without that concept in the budget, and when I go back to a letter from Health Plan in Nevada, I can tell you I have no conversations with anyone from First Transit regarding the benefit plan for employees. It still gives me pause. Not a judgment, but pause, because I don't want our employees to lose anything that they have. In fact, they need to, and deserve better, but that said, enough loopholes are there. And then finally, and I go back to, I'm not supporting Veolia or First Transit. I do believe we need to get rid of the monopoly. But I do go back to a letter from Stanley Washington, and that is on the DBEs. Bringing in out-of-state minority company when we have local in-state companies that are quite capable of doing the business and are currently doing the business, and we dump them is wrong. And we have to do a better job on whatever we procure, because even though the feds don't require, or they do a certain threshold, I believe we should be promoting the local businesses, women and minority owned, and we should comply with AB 144 from last session, no matter what, as far as local job hiring. So those are some of the reasons that I'm offering the motion, and when it can go up, it can go down. But we do have a monopoly, and it's time to step back and say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right way to do business. We've got 2, possibly 3 wonderful companies, and there may be more that come into play that want our business. Now come prove out. And we're going to make you prove out one more time. And if that means it takes a year, then it takes a year. Because in the long run, it's our obligation to do what's right. And just because you can does not mean you should. And so in the long run, that's really what's facing us today. I don't think, despite the press that's been out there, I have worked with many of these men and women here, and how dare they comment about our chairman, let alone some of the people that have a job now as lobbyists. I have never worked with a better group of people that make a conscious decision based on their beliefs and their conscience and their morals. And how dare anyone make an assumption that we're doing something to better someone else. So for those who have that mindset, shame on you. Because in this board has been very diligent. That's why we've spent this much time agonizing over the decision that we're going to make. And you're going to find that no matter what the vote is, we're making it because we think it's right, not because it's right for the press. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman. Councilman Hafen.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
No, you told us last meeting.
90
that
seconds, okay?
No, you're never short on words, so please.
I appreciate the process. I appreciate the public input. I'm kind of a newcomer here. But the American way is a little bit of competition. We talked about monopolies. We talked about doing what's right. We talked about doing what's moral. We talked about doing what's fair. As I said before, I don't care who wins this process or who wins the bid. We've basically, with competent staff, scored a process which we agreed to. I guess the challenge that I face right now is the message that's sent on whether we do the right thing, the wrong thing. Everybody's going to have their opinion on whether they think we do the right thing or whether we do the wrong thing. We have an obligation. We followed a process. We agreed to a process. I'm just having a challenge, trying to gather all the information. You know, we can go back out for another year. We've been through this process for a year. We agreed to the rules. From a kid, I've played ball. I've played a lot of things. Excuse the competitiveness for Councilwoman Tarkanian. To me, it's un-American that we don't make a decision when we had competent staff. It's in the best interest for the residents of Southern Nevada, Clark County. We get away from the monopoly things. In 3 years, we've gone through the process. We did it 3 years ago. I guess I'm having a challenge. I appreciate the comments by both sides. I think it was respectful. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If First Transit is awarded, or Veolia, I would hope that they would respect and use employees that have a good track record, that care about the communities, that understand the routes, that are safe, competent, quality, qualified individuals. And if they're not, then I think that they need to come right back here, and there should be another, maybe not quite 6 different meetings of 4 to 5 hours in length of discussion, but I think this board will, you'll see the demonstration of their commitment to the citizens of Southern Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, my turn. 2 great companies. I think that's been mentioned in every meeting we've been in. And I certainly want to compliment the fact that despite the groundhog experience over the last 4 or 5 months, that fixed transit keeps moving, paratransit keeps moving, so the companies have maintained that professionalism. I also want to compliment the PR machines on both Veolia and First Transit. I know they've been in overdrive the last 60 days. I don't usually pay attention to articles because that's part of it, the coverage. I've always felt it's very difficult for a beat writer or someone that follows perhaps the RTC to put something as comprehensive as this into a 4-column article. It's just not fair. So they always look for the sound bites. The first thing that concerned me was, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, when the RJ reported that there may be some conflicts of interest. I don't have the article in front of me, but they mentioned a few of the board members and certainly me. And for the record, I'm going to disclose, I didn't think I had to, but I talked to my county counsel, Mary Ann Miller, and she said, out of the abundance of caution, disclose. So during a recent mayoral campaign, my campaign team hired a polling firm, which is Strategic Solutions, which is owned by Terry Murphy. That's on my public disclosure statements, my campaign reports, and I think it's a stretch, but since it's out there, I'll disclose. I'd be more concerned with the appearance of a conflict, but for the fact that Terry's representing First Transit. So if there was a conflict or there was something that I was doing as a quid pro quo with Terry Murphy, I'm not so sure I would be voting against First Transit the last few votes that were taken. But for the record, I'm disclosing that. It's public information. It's on my campaign reports. I think in that article, which the writer, unless she's willing to say something differently, didn't just wake up one morning and come up with these. So in communications with someone out there, these things were raised. That's a little bit disappointing. But it's part of the game because both firms have hired wonderful talent, and to represent their clients' best interests, I can accept that. I can appreciate it. Today's article is a little bit different, and I think Commissioner G referred to it. It's the morning beat writer that starts out, and by the way, this beat writer contacted a couple of my colleagues, but for some reason did not contact me. And this issue of the loyalty is what I want to put on the record and make it very clear. Because in this report, it's like if we start over in this corner, I think this used to be a first grade exercise. Pass the sentence on, that little sentence, and have everybody whisper in everybody's ear. By the time it ends up there, it's all over the map. And people start becoming selective in what they remember. Or if they catch on to something, that becomes gospel. $50 million has become gospel in this. My comments about why I supported Veolia last time dealt with loyalty. But they've removed the 90% of the statement I made leading up to the loyalty. I started with I'm a loyal person, I ended with loyalty, but they seem to have missed that. And in the latest, and I'm not even sure if this is valid anymore, but this is First Transit's suit. And once again, I read through everything. And in there, they even start. Larry Brown voted because of loyalty. That was his reasoning. Which is so disappointing because in your own documents, you have the verbatim transcript of when I went through my reasoning. Now, why do you do that? Is it to embarrass me? Is it to make a better case for First Transit if we go to court? I don't know. But that was disappointing. It's very disappointing because it's disingenuous, and if it's part of a strategy, a media strategy, that's fine. This reporter hasn't been doing anything on this contract for 4 or 5 months. How all of a sudden it shows up this morning. Again, I don't think, and she didn't call me, and we've had a relationship in the past where we've communicated. She didn't call me, or I don't think she woke up and said, hey, I'm going to write an article on this. this was fed, this information was fed. And it's disappointing, again, because it's just taking snippets of probably thousands of pages of public testimony, public hearing, lawsuits, countersuits, and just taking a couple words. It's just so disappointing. I don't mind the criticism, but if you're going to criticize a statement I made, at least acknowledge the, personally, probably 40, 50, 60 hours I've put into just reading and trying to learn and become educated. I would appreciate that. I really would. And the fact that someone would say that I have a conflict with Terry Murphy or I may be influenced by Terry Murphy is, and lose my objectivity. I think it was framed that she worked on my campaign. Well, I paid her company to do polling in a campaign. I'm not so sure the perception of the appearance was well stated. But I think it's an insult when people are going to start looking at this board and start saying, you know, that person over there 15, 20 years ago, I think their spouse may have been involved with one of the consultants involved today. When you start reaching out that far, and again, it's the media that's not coming up with this on their own. It's being fed. That's where I draw the line. I will speak as far as the disagreements this board has had on this issue over the last 3 or 4 months has been very respectful. I don't question anyone's decision or the justification of why they voted. I really don't. And I respect it. And I would hope that there's a little bit of that reciprocal respect coming from both applicants. But when people start picking and choosing and start condemning or criticizing the reasons that were given, or in this case, the most recent case, selective on one word versus a very, very comprehensive public record, that again, disingenuous at best, perhaps insulting at the worst. But that's my disclosure for the record, so at least Ms. Murphy feels comfortable and the reporters feel comfortable. To the point, and there's been some great points made. Before I leave that last subject, those of you that aren't familiar with those that are representing Veolia and First Transit, I can simply say that the representation is Southern Nevada's finest. I'm not sure we could say which one has the stronger team of local advocates, but I think there's a relationship with most of the board members on just interacting with all the advocates for Veolia and First Transit. But back in, I think it was April, Jacob, just for the record, correct me if my dates are wrong, because I do want to make a very strong public record today and maybe bring clarity to some of the things that have been mentioned before. In April, we didn't take a vote, but we directed staff to, I think, negotiate with First Transit.
It's been so long now, I'm not sure I could give you the correct date, but in March, I believe,
Was it March?
the commission
Okay.
directed the staff to negotiate with First
And
Transit.
thank you, because in March, and somewhere in this lawsuit and the public documents, they at least acknowledged that during that time is the first concern I had about the overall process. And that's going to be a very strong portion of my comments today, the process. At that point, we were basically telling staff to go negotiate a contract, and yet, at that point in time, the board had not heard any public presentations from either applicant, and I think that was a mistake. Intuitively, I felt uncomfortable. On the record, I made it clear that by no means was this a done deal, that at the next meeting, we were going to have a lot of I encouraged both applicants to talk to as many board members. So that was the beginning of the process that I felt uncomfortable. Some of them have been mentioned before. The reasons why we went out 45, 55%. The reality, and I don't think it was our intent, but the reality that every time we came to a publicly posted meeting, we were receiving information up until the latest point, including Jeremy Aguero's report that prior to that Thursday morning meeting, I at least received it at 6 o'clock the prior evening, and I think my colleagues may have done, which even today ends up being one of the most critical components of this whole argument. And after a 6, 7, 8-hour meeting, I think retrospectively, we probably should have held back and asked the questions that have come up over the last 60 days to Jeremy at that point. But is it a flaw in the process that it seemed like every meeting we had, we were getting information up until the very last minute? I don't know. But again, added to the uneasiness of the overall process. The pricing, it's pretty interesting. If we say price is important, and I can understand, Jacob, you've stated on the record why we really emphasize pricing on this, because of the economy. I can understand that. What I still haven't got comfortable with, and it would be a comment later on to whether this goes forward or not today, on better handling the pricing, that we can just have someone look at a bottom line number, say this is lower, A is lower than B, that's the low bid, 100 points. And that was in the RFP. I'm not questioning that that was part of the RFP, so it came as no surprise. But it's certainly within my discretion as a board member to start asking questions, why did we? And one of the things, and most of the board members and others have questioned the components of that pricing. So when would have been the appropriate time to ask questions about why this price of A was lower than B when it comes to health or whatever the components are? That was something that made me uncomfortable. I didn't think the pricing should have been an automatic. I thought there's an opportunity, and we've talked about this since, to have people that understand the cost of health benefits, and people understand, the cost of oil or whatever the case may be in these applications. Experts to take a look at that, to better define and better legitimize those numbers. But to just blanketly say, here's the low number, 100 points, felt uncomfortable with that. The anomalies, and for the record, you just go back to the comments I made before. One of the key areas that I was concerned was the anomalies in the 4 raters. Those that rated it, and Mr. Kempfer may have brought it up, but this was provided to us, and I don't know if it was provided to us by staff, but just the standard deviations from means, by eliminating the one number for First Transit, I think it was the 93, at a 6.7 deviation from mean, and the low ball score for Veolia, that changed the whole dynamic of the scoring, which would have, on the RFP, flipped that. Now, am I saying that whoever evaluator X was did that on purpose? I can't, and I wouldn't. I don't think we can get into that kind of conspiracy dialogue, but I do know statistically, looking at those numbers, they are, the Veolia had a deviation of the other 3 raters of 0.17. Just another component in explaining for the record why I voted the way I did. This was discussed before. This isn't new. This isn't the one line loyal was the reason I voted the way I did. Jeremy's report. It's amazing that both applicants have used Jeremy's report to say why they're the best bid. And that in itself is a little bit disconcerting, only because Jeremy was supposed to be doing those numbers for us. And whether they were hurried, or whether we was in Carson City, or whether we didn't have enough time to vet it, to have both firms quoting from his report, justifying why Veolia wins, First Transit wins, all those scenarios. And that was a critical component that we had asked for as a board, and Jacob had done. Another one of the reasons that I wasn't comfortable. And they built up to the part of my comments, and I've explained this and shared this with Jacob, that all of my concerns did not reach, or First Transit's application, coupled with my concerns, did not reach the tipping point where I was going to say, First Transit, you have my support. It had raised enough concern and questions in my mind, and those were some of the reasons I've put on the record for 3 or 4 or 5 months now. Just to correct Commissioner June Kiliani, at the May meeting, again, let me get the lawsuit from First Transit that they were so... I started talking about options, and we talked about breaking up, not breaking up. We talked about other cities, other operators, and it was stated either on the record, Jake, or somewhere in our conversations, that RTC is the largest service area
Largest public bus contract in the country.
with one operator.
Correct.
Okay. And that was important. And then, Commissioner G, I made that motion to reject or withdraw, I don't know the exact words, First Transit and direct staff to come back with options. And I still feel that way. I still feel that's the direction that we should go in. We lost that vote, or I lost that motion, 3-4. And if I'm not mistaken, Councilman Eliason made a motion for a 3-year contract, which passed 4-3. And that was the end of the meeting. We thanked everybody for their professionalism, their patience, and we moved on. At that point, it was done. The AG's issue came up, which I did not call up the AG and say, hey, I think I made a mistake. Someone out there, in conversations with Mr. Kaplan, said we may have an issue. Now, I don't know the time period elapsed from when it became an issue or when the AG's ruling came down, but that was, and whether you agree with the ruling or not, I think it was very clear that this board had to abide by the AG's opinion or potentially face some charges. That was done last meeting. So it's come full circle. Here we are. And I will wind up my comments by saying simply that my uneasiness of the process has not changed. No one's given me a comfort level that this could have been done differently. It has been raised, and perhaps Commissioner Woodbury raised it, that we may be sending a bad signal. The FTA may come in and start looking at what we do. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. I felt uncomfortable back in March, and my uneasiness in the process has not subsided. It just seemed we kept being pushed against deadline and deadline. And I would hope that, again, regardless of this vote, that in the future, we fix that process to bring this board and engage the board on the front end in a public hearing versus kind of waiting until we're at the 11th hour and we have to start doing things. I think that put far too much pressure on staff and far too much pressure on the applicants and far too much pressure on the board. But the bottom line is no one can challenge what the RTC Commission has done as far as making this a public process. Painfully so. And the groundhog analogy aside, we have spent in public hearings well into the teens and probably upwards of 20 hours of allowing board members to speak, citizens to speak, employees to speak, applicants to speak, advocates to speak, attorneys to speak, and I don't regret 1 minute of allowing that opportunity. One of my colleagues mentioned it. It's been a very, very the debate, the public policy debate amongst this board has been an interesting dynamic. We haven't agreed, and perhaps we won't agree. It may be stalemated. But I don't, and I'll reiterate, I don't question the integrity or the reasoning behind anyone's vote here today or in the past few months. I absolutely don't. And if anyone out there does, at least give us the common courtesy and respect to come tell us that you have some concerns, and not work through these type 11th hour, Johnny-come-latelys, let's throw something against the wall and see if it sticks. Let me repeat, I don't mind criticism. I don't think any of us in this job can get by without criticism. But when it's manipulated and it's done to the detriment of a fair public process or a fair public hearing, that's when I have concerns. I've said enough. So we'll ask for any other comments or questions, and then we'll go to the motion.
Mr. Chair, what is the motion that was made earlier?
Commissioner June Kiliani, could you repeat your motion?
I'll try. I had scribbly notes. My motion was to reject staff's recommendation with respect and direct that the contract be divided and rebid with the intent of bringing recommendations back for selection back to us within a year. Further, that staff negotiate extensions with Veolia on the fixed route and First Transit with regard to paratransit until that the procurement has been, the new procurers have been selected.
I didn't hear the first part of that. Would you just say the first half of that?
Certainly. That I would move to reject staff's recommendation and to split the contracts, basically, and go back to bid.
And you're not saying to 2 to 3 to 4 or anything?
No.
You're just leaving it up to the, to Jacob?
I gave a
and the staff?
guideline of a year because I believe, based on the conversations today and in the past, we heard from anywhere from 6 to 9 to 12 months to get a new bid out there. Plus, if we do make a decision through, as a board, to change going from the current process because of the federal requirement of the IFB or whatever that terminology is, where we did lowest best offer versus the other, that may give a time to speed up the process and actually get us more focused on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify the motion. I'm not questioning the motivations behind all this, but we haven't, a few years ago, we did talk about splitting the contract. I believe that came from staff. And I believe the board decided not to split it, and I think Veolia even lobbied to not split the contract, and I may be wrong, but I think you were against it at the time. Now, after May, after we went through this whole process, now we're saying maybe we better start splitting the contract. Once again, that's my concern. We're changing the game this late in the game. This late. Mr. Snow, is this something that your staff's recommending to approve First Transit, but to go out and now change this to where we split the contract, is that something that you think would be wise at this point in the game? Or, I know I'm putting a lot of pressure on you on this, but once again, it seems like we flip-flopped on this whole splitting the contract thing, and it's kind of right after we were going to award the contract, we decided to put it back. I understand the concerns of monopolies, but that wasn't brought up when we originally put this RFP out. I don't remember us having real conversations about why aren't we splitting it when we put the RFP out.
I don't mind the pressure. I don't mind the question. My recommendation to the board, what I think is the best for the public, is to award the contract to First Transit. I think the next best thing to do, if we can't get movement from the board on that recommendation, then I would recommend that you reprocure and split the contract.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add to Jacob's response? As your legal advisor, if you choose that policy that you want to go out and consider splitting the contract, I suggest when we come back and have that policy discussion that we consider still having the alternative, because we really don't know what the costs are going to be, whether it's really more efficient and cost effective to split it or not. So my recommendation to you would be, at that point in time, we put out a procurement that's in the alternative, that we have proposals that could come in for the entire service, or in the alternative of splitting it in however many practical ways that you so choose to direct us. But at least at that point, you would actually know from the marketplace what is the most cost-effective means of doing it, because now we really don't have that information.
Commissioner June Kiliani?
As the maker of the motion, I would have no problems, but I don't think the motion needs to speak to that. I think you're absolutely correct. We would need to bring back an agenda item to do that conversation so this board can make that decision. So I understand that completely.
Mr. Chairman, I just got a question. when we first started this procurement, wasn't there 3 firms in, and we lost one out? So
That's
we
correct.
did have, you know, it wasn't just a monopoly. We did have the 3 firms, but we lost one for some technical reason of some sort, correct?
We had a firm called MV Transportation that proposed. They're a good firm, they're a capable firm, but this bus contract was really too large for that company to deal with compared to the rest of the others, and so they didn't make it over that hurdle into the final,
All right,
best and
thank you.
final offer. If the commission were to decide that they wanted to seriously look at the possibility of splitting the contract, then MV would be they'd be a very solid competitor, and there might be 1 or 2 other firms that could compete as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilwoman Tarkanian.
That's, though, the MV was the other company that was there in Phoenix, and there was there also in Long Island, and it seems to be they're very capable, and my understanding was the reason why they weren't considered, which I think you just were reaffirming, Jacob, was because they weren't large enough to be able to handle the size of this job.
That's correct.
But now, if we put out the bid, they could bid as others could, which I think will get us in the end a better price. I really believe that. Could I just say a few words, because Mr. Hafen mentioned the problem of everybody being new, and I'm not much newer. I haven't been here much longer than you, and I certainly agree with what you said. It's very, very difficult. And, you know, during this process, I came to the realization that I needed to make a vote, determine my belief, my understanding, what I felt was best for public policy on the total package at the beginning of the process, and not try and pick up the threads of actions taken before I became an RTC member. I just figured I was trying so hard to work in with others what they had done, I couldn't do it because my beliefs were so deep. If I had been here at the beginning, I would have fought very hard to have more than one private partner involved. And I know maybe, as you said, this wasn't brought up, but that's because we also have different members on the board now, and I believe so strongly in that. If we can break this tendency toward monopolization, we develop a policy that's best financially and service-wise to our citizens. And after all, those are the people we represent, and I believe it's going to help our citizens in the rural areas also. So we dropped paratransit. We still are the largest with only one partner, and I do believe so strongly we need to divide that up. I want to thank you very much, and also, can I just say thank you to all the people that I called over the past weeks that were so kind to me, particularly Jacob. Late at night, early in the morning, each of you and other people, as I tried to get a better understanding, were just very kind and took the time and patience, and I really appreciate it very much. And I also appreciate the tremendous professionalism of both groups. And I also appreciate that the CEO of First Transit is here, and I think that he spoke very eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, well, everybody comfortable with the motion as it stands? All right? As it stands, as it's stated, I'm sorry.
As I'm sitting.
So there's a motion on the floor.
Should we have taken the motion that was actually stated by the RTC first?
The recommendation.
That's why my motion, if I might, Mr. Chair, parliamentary-wise, you can take it by rejecting and then giving the direction and do it in one, and that's what my suggestion is.
And can I ask one more thing? And that is, I just want to make sure that if we continue 1 year with Veolia, or if we have the first year of the current contract presented by First Transit, that they're very similar in cost for the year that we would be taking to investigate opening this up.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's not just investigating whether to open it up. It is to give staff that direction. It'll come back as an additional agenda item on how to split up that contract, but I think it needs to be clear for the record on that. Thank you.
And/or the alternative.
And/or the alternative.
Okay. Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed signify by raising your hand. Okay. Did the recorder receive those votes and the respective people that raised their hands? Okay, that is a 4-4 vote. And Mr. Kaplan, would you rule on that vote?
Oh, I get to vote?
No. I just,
Do I get campaign contributions and lobbied or what?
You need to
No,
start
actually-
humming the bars from "I Got You, Babe" from Sonny and Cher.
Actually,
that motion fails.
that's what, you needed 5 votes, so that motion did not carry.
Okay. Now, we will move for additional motions.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we go with staff recommendation, and that along with that recommendation, that in the next couple of years, we look at splitting that contract.
And Mayor, just for clarification, is that for the 3-year or for the full term of the 7 years?
It would be the 3-year with determination with if it should be extended or not.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed signify by raising your hand. 4-4.
Again, Mr. Chairman, there's not approval of that motion.
Jacob, could you put back up on the screen Bill Murray?
There he is. And I think that's Andy McDowell, I believe. I'm not sure.
All right, council, what are our options?
We have none.
You can continue to entertain motions, or you can go to the next item, which would be citizens'
And if we go to the
participation.
next item, what is the status of the RFP and the contract? Is it just,
It's where it was when you first came to it today.
And-
Nothing changes. We have in place the month-to-month extension commencing late September through sometime in March with Veolia for the fixed route contract, pursuant to the terms of the existing contract that allowed that. And other than that, everything's pretty much status quo.
and to place a similar agenda item on, or the exact same agenda item on, next month is whose decision?
That would be this commission's.
Okay, so either a request from the commissioner, a commissioner, or staff can put it back on, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to request that. I'm also going to request of Jacob, Mr. Snow, to present to the commissioners in your briefings a description of the bids from the third participant in the RFP process as well. I'd like to see the numbers, operating numbers, what the bids were, all the bids look like.
Okay.
I'd like to see that. We know what the operation numbers look like. We've got them. I want to see those. I want the commissioners to see those and compare that with all 3 bids that came in from the 3 competing companies. Can you do that for us
Yes, sir.
prior to the next time we visit Groundhog Day?
We could probably do that by next week,
Okay.
early next week, if not today.
Commissioner June Kiliani.
Thank you. To the 2 parties here, because you are mutually respected and you've worked together and you actually have shared contracts in many other jurisdictions, I think you might have another opportunity to perhaps have a conversation amongst yourselves to maybe bring in a request to an agenda item to one of the commissioners as well. And I just throw that out there as a potential idea. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, one other thing.
Mayor
you know,
Tobler.
I understand your reservations, and you brought them up, and I won't question those, and I think you brought up some good points. But I think Councilmember March also brought up that, maybe those shouldn't be the only numbers that we look at, that an audit is done on current operations and really see if there's discrepancies and whether these companies can move forward. So maybe that, I don't know if that's something we can do very quickly, but Veolia even offered that today, and I commend them for that. I think that's also a possibility, because if we're able to look at those numbers and see that these contracts aren't far off from that, then, we probably should move forward. So I don't know if that's something that we could entertain or would be helpful at this point, but I think it's a possibility.
Be more, so do an audit of,
Of the current operations. What what you were questioning were specific numbers and different departmentalized within wages, salaries, or benefits and those type of things, and see where we're at.
An audit of the applications or the
No, current operations.
current operations?
Yeah. If we have questions on whether those could be met with the current applicants, that might be somewhere where we could start. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. If that wouldn't be helpful, then staff needs to probably say, well, that probably wouldn't tell us a whole lot.
Mr. Kaplan, the mayor has suggested something. Is that agenda item worthy, or is that considered direction?
I think that would be direction to staff, along with what Councilman Ross had asked for. I believe staff may already have some of that, because there was an audit done, or at least a partial audit. So the finance staff may have some of those numbers already, and along with all three original proposer MV, and as well as First and Veolia, you could compare all the numbers with the current operating numbers, and then if that helps you all, then, let's understand.
I think the uneasiness is with some of the numbers that are being thrown forth. I don't think at this point, if you have those, we wouldn't have to move forward with the forensic audit. But if, once again, in my opinion, these are the experts, and you've already looked at a lot of those line items and different things, and you brought your recommendation for us. But if we don't have that comfort level of seeing it ourselves, like Councilman Ross just pointed out, then in our briefings, that's what's need to be brought forward.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, in terms of the procurement process, though, what you're really looking at is either you're comfortable with going with staff recommendation or rejecting it, or you're going to take that information and basically rescore it yourself. You're still bound, really, to follow what was submitted in the proposals and the scoring criteria. So considering extraneous information goes to whether or not you're comfortable with approving staff's recommendation, but really you can't score it differently unless you were to take all the documents and go score it yourselves.
And the mayor brings up, the point is, you're saying that because the RFP was framed, that a staff member or 3 staff members would look, and the bottom number, that was it. That was the bottom number, 100 points. There was no evaluation done as far as the legitimacy of how they got that number, the factors coming in, and certainly a health expert coming in and saying, yeah, these health and benefit numbers are doable.
The requirements is a firm fixed price to the commission. The requirements for an analysis are a price analysis, not a cost analysis, because there was competition. You had 3 proposals with 3 prices. What you have to do is look at those prices that were the bottom line numbers, not all the elements, because everyone builds their cost model, their pricing models differently. So you look at the bottom line number, and you'd look at comparable contracts elsewhere, you'd look at our current operations costs, or the prices we're paying now, rather, and you'd say, is that a reasonable price? That's the analysis that needed to be done.
And I think that was part of Jeremy's body of work. Mr. Hobbs and someone for Veolia also submitted reports.
Correct.
But of course, those were biased because they're paid for by the firms. But that was even Mr. Aguero's report, and I wish we had taken 2 hours to go through that. Retrospectively, perhaps that's the board's responsibility, but again, I emphasize, if that was the opportunity to challenge the validity of numbers presented, I think it's a missed opportunity from the board's perspective, from staff's perspective. Because Jeremy spoke for 20 minutes and has raised more questions than, and at least from my perspective, than answers. I don't think that was his intent. But when you have both firms using the report to justify why they should win, that's an issue. Commissioner Giuliani.
Thank you. Then if we're going to look at that, then that's exactly part of the concern. If you go back to comparative analysis, on that one single document that I am finding, do we define service miles per year versus service hour per year the same? Because if I go to the FTI report from Mr. Hobbs, it says, can you reasonably be inferred by the above data at a rate of $60.78 per service hour and $4.97 per service hour, it is feasible for FTI to provide the service that they have proposed. In our opinion, the data would not support that inference. But then I go to applied analysis, their cost that they're citing is $62.93. So we have differences between service hours, service miles, and none of them match up within the documents that people looked at. So again, it calls into question what's what. And then, to me, it's about a collective bargaining agreement. Hopefully, Veolia settles something, but either way, we got to make sure that that's the basis of the comparative of apple to apple so that we know what benefits are actually costing and what salary are currently within that. And then finally, I think it would be interesting to see the past contract language that was sent out for previous RFPs in this category. I'd like to look at that to compare it to what we sent out this time. Thank you.
Mr. Kaplan, another question, and perhaps I was being too facetious earlier as far as the third option, the board rescoring, which is valid.
Right.
And I'm not so sure I'd like to take a formal vote to make sure that that's part of the public record too, that the board, did I miss my opportunity?
No, you're still on the item. You can, if you want to make that motion or someone else does.
My colleagues understand, earlier I said, anybody that wants to rescore this, stand up and pound the table. And perhaps I was being too facetious. I'd like to take a vote. I for one, my motion would be to eliminate or deny that option to the board as far as us rescoring the applications. Is that okay as far as a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right. Everybody understand that motion?
Then why are we auditing and asking for additional information if that's the case?
This is strictly on us rescoring, us taking the documents and as a board serving as the evaluation committee.
Okay, because that was one of Zeb's original three that we could have taken a look at. Gotcha, okay.
Zeb, would that be separate from the information that's been requested?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Ross.
I requested that of staff because I think we need to look at everything here. And I think that would be helpful for us as commissioners to make that decision one way or the other for one company or the other. We're obviously not going anywhere today. Veolia is still going to continue to provide service to the residents of Southern Nevada. We're going to rehear this one more time, hopefully only one more time. That's where we're going. So I just want to be clear on that. We're getting more information. Mayor Tolbert suggested taking a look at that audit. I'd like to see those numbers sitting in front of me. I don't care how you present them, Mr. Snow, but I think that's going to be helpful for all of us to better kind of get a grip on this. Again, for me, it's numbers. It's that big number, and it's that high number, it's that low number. That's what greatly concerns me, and that's what I want to see. So I don't want any of the other commissioners to be confused. Whether we break up the contract or don't break up the contract or it's a monopoly, it's a number thing for me. I want to see those numbers closer. I want to see that competitive edge.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm going to withdraw the motion only because if we're coming back with the exact same agenda item, does that not put the same three in front of us again?
At that point, you still have those same three opportunities.
I'll withdraw my motion.
And once, that doesn't resolve the issue for those that really have a problem with the monopoly, though. I mean, if that's really the deal breaker, I mean, that's going to not change anything. So.
Well, it comes to a point of when does the board starts micromanaging staff and not allowing staff to do their jobs, and we as a policy board make policy.
When they get the right to vote? In answer to the question in my mind, staff gets to advise us, we make the decision. So when staff gets the right to vote, then they can be up here and equal partners, but in the long run, with no disrespect, they aren't.
Yeah, and it's an important point. It's been brought up a couple times in different meetings that the FTA followed this process. We created this process. The process was good. But as a board, we have tremendous discretion in making decisions. If not, we should have just said low bid wins.
Well, and that could be your policy decision, but that's what, if whether it's on this procurement or another future procurement, as the board, you can direct staff how you'd like to see it structured and the framework of it and all that. That's a policy decision.
And we could have done that before.
But let's make it clear then for the record. What's transpired over the last 3 public hearings has been well within the discretion of an elected board at the RTC.
Yeah, the board has not stepped outside its bounds of discretion.
Just want to make sure that's clear. I want to make sure that's clear. Okay, we have some sidebars happening out there. Mr. Kemfer, Senator Bryan, someone's going to come up with the solution.
Well, it's not really a solution, it's a suggestion that is 30 days really going to be enough to do this? And I suggested that perhaps it would be 60, and they don't have a preference one way or another. I just don't want to come back, not have all the information that you need done, and then we got to come back again in October. So it would seem to me that if you're talking about really gathering the information, finding out what costs are of this or that, health insurance, wages, may also give us time to finalize discussions with labor. It just seems like 60 days is a smarter time frame than 30. But that's my thought, and they have no preference one way or the other.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Ross.
Thank you. And Mr. Kemfer, I didn't want you to think that we're asking for that kind of number breakdown. I think what I'm asking for this commission to see are the 3 bids, actual operating costs. That's all I want to see as a commissioner. That's what I want them, all the rest of my fellow commissioners, to see those numbers as well, so we can actually make a more informed decision.
Oh, I thought you were also looking to see, for example, based on Commissioner June Kiliani's comment about Jeremy Aguero's report as to whether what's the price of oil, what really is the price of oil, what really is the price of health care.
Through the chair, that's not what I'm asking at all. I'm just asking for those numbers, so we see what actual operating costs are and what those numbers look like when they went out or came back from the RFP. Again, it's that big gap.
Whatever you want. I don't know how detailed you want it to be. So if it's...
We can get that information to you this afternoon.
Well, we can always strike the agenda item, but that is the plan to move forward for next month with that other information. The fact that neither motion passed, no action, we move on to the next item.
Correct.
My understanding that it's going to be on next month's agenda, and if the board members aren't comfortable that the information they've requested hasn't been provided, we will, in a appropriate time frame, strike it from the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your next item is citizens' participation.
Citizens' participation. Those that haven't spoken to the board today, please step forward and state your name on issues relating to the RTC.
Thank you. Todd Farlow, 240 North 19th Street. One contract that did not turn out well is when the commission awarded the contract for seating
could
to
I ask
Tomas
you, could I ask you to hold off for about 1 minute?
Yes, you can.
And then Todd, then start again, okay? Okay, Mr. Farlow, if we could begin public participation, and please state your name for the record.
Thank you. Todd Farlow, 240 North 19th Street. The bike trails still haven't been fixed that I've been complaining about. The public information officer and I are going to take a bike ride along the trail, and we're going to see if we can nail down exactly what I'm talking about. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. Mr. Maviglia.
This guy's got a legitimate beef. He brings his stuff here, okay, and he's legitimate. And nobody seems to give a damn. And that bugs me. Why? You got the strength, all right, being the commission and the commissioner, to tell these people to address this guy's concerns about those fenced-off areas. Nobody seems to want to do a damn thing about it. That's ludicrous, shameful. And I ask you to step in and put a fire under them people to help this guy out, because his beef is legitimate.
Thank you, Joe. Would you state your name for the record?
Joe Aloysius Maviglia,
Thank you.
the people's choice. Oh, the last word is, I've been in this town for 40 years, and I've watched you people perform, the good ones and the bad ones. And it's got to the point where who the hell trusts who? It's a shame. It's a downright shame. Because all of you are technically responsible to the people. You're not responsible to yourself or your own special interest. You're responsible to the people and what the people's needs are. And you're supposed to address that with open-mindedness and honesty and integrity. Shouldn't be any other way. You know, what's surprising is the year before they nailed them all, the county commissioners that went to the penitentiary, I stepped in front of the dais one day and I said, you know, corruption is alive and well in Clark County. And the two that screamed bloody murder was Kenny and Malone. They said, you can't do that to us. You can't insult us. I said, hey, if the shoe fits, wear it. Now, I've observed this board today, and this 4-4 vote boggles my mind, because what's this woman over here? What does she do?
Joe, address your comments up here.
To the young lady over there.
Mr. Maviglia.
What's her position?
Susan Martinovich is the director of the Nevada Department of Transportation.
Oh, so she's not involved in the
Not
votes?
ex officio, not a voting member.
Yeah. Well, I don't go for Veolia or First Transit. What I do go for is the honesty and integrity that you all should stand tall for and be responsible for. If you do that with a good, clean conscience, and there's no special interest, no favors being played, then get on about your business and do your job. And if it takes a couple of extra months or a year or whatever it takes to find the best bang for the buck, then you're doing your job. And that I respect you for.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice day.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the board?
Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, Jeff Rask, Financial Secretary, ATU. In representing the bargaining unit, I've heard discussion here relating to the breakup of the system into probably two parts. Unless we can have direct negotiations with the RTC on the CBA, in which case I'm sure most of you have read the white paper that we put out back in October. If we can come up with some sort of a hybrid system where we have our CBA directly with the RTC, and whoever comes in to operate the system would have to accept that CBA. We don't become employees of the RTC, which we don't have a problem with. We can go into the details of the CBA and the logistics of it in terms of benefits parts of the benefits package on who would pay for what, and parts of PTO time, which is personal time off, and vacation time, and those issues. I'm sure that we can come to an agreement where the RTC can do the negotiations with the ATU on a CBA, and whoever comes in to manage the system would have to accept the CBA as part of the package. This is where we stand. We cannot accept the breakup of the system where we would have to negotiate two separate contracts, and our members might have a better contract under one company than the other, which would pit our members against each other. That would be unacceptable to our union. And I think that we can come to some sort of a situation where we can do a hybrid system of negotiating with the RTC, ATU with the RTC, and come up with a CBA that can be incorporated within the package that you present to your vendor. And I would hope that somebody would present this as a motion that this be looked into. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Finishing up, Commissioners, Jose Mendoza Jr., ATU President for 1637. This is a perfect example of what's happening to the bargaining unit. We are being played like pawns, and we are really upset. This is a process that shouldn't have even happened. Now we got to go to our membership and tell them what's been going on, and I'm sure they've already been getting text messages. And eventually, hopefully, something gets resolved because we don't have a contract. Our operators and maintenance and the rest of the bargaining unit are waiting for a raise. They have not received a raise since January 1st. Viola had an opportunity back last year to go ahead and negotiate, and they refused. And we had to file an ULP. So eventually, hopefully, down the road, things get resolved. And in overall, the other contractor, MV, who were really wanting MV to kind of be the contractor because we heard a lot of stories about them that they are a good employer. But in the end, hopefully, we might come to some kind of conclusion between RTC and the union and have a contract with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for staying with us all day.
Council, how you doing? Just a quick thought, and I think
Put your name back
Tom
on the record?
Janicki,
Thanks.
once again. Again, I think Mr. Ross could understand this. This whole process, I think you guys are maybe starting to micromanage it, the contract, a little bit too much. As a layperson, I can't understand. If you go to build a house, you show a contractor a blueprint, okay? You show these bus companies the bus routes. How much can you do the job for? Does it really matter how much the cost his cost of nails are, or how much he is paying that laborer? No, the job and the point of the job is to build a house. It's not how much are you paying the laborer. Well, I can get it cheaper over here at this company. Well, yeah, but he doesn't work for this company. That's where I think you guys put yourself in maybe a corner. Backed yourselves up against a wall, is tried to micromanage, asking good questions, but maybe too much, sometimes too much information is bad information. And that's all I'm trying to say is, but bottom line, it's the people in the rural areas that are being affected. And if it's like, you guys work for Clark County. Well, I'm on welfare. So I have to deal with social services. Again, if that bus they require me to go into their offices in Vegas. If I don't have a route because the bus service gets cut to go to Vegas, and I'm already limited to going there once a week, and they're not very cooperative on their time frame. But I'm just saying, now I can't get to Vegas to go to that appointment to get my welfare reinstated. Now where do I sit? And that's a county operation. All of the county affiliated help, they're all based in Vegas. They're not based in Laughlin. They're not based in Mesquite. But how do we get there if we don't have a vehicle, if we don't have some sort of transportation? And again, bottom line, I'm kind of like Mr. Hafen. I don't care who gets the contract. It's like, I don't really think you guys care who the manufacturer of your car is. As long as your four wheels go and you're going down the road, you're good. But then those are my four wheels. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming down, Tom. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple comments from the transportation side of the world that I understand a little better. First of all, I've enjoyed listening to the comments, and because a lot of lessons learned that we can put into our practices, so every opportunity to learn. I-15, you know, was closed yesterday because of a tanker spill. We took the opportunity to do some graffiti cleanup, and since the road was cleaned and just to get out there, there was extensive damage to the pavement. Asphalt, fire, and diesel do not mix, and so we do have to have a emergency construction that will start in the next couple days that will impact traffic through that area. Also on the I-15 arena is that we're going out with an overlay project from Spaghetti Bowl up to 215, and what that is because if you recall, there's been a lot of striping changes that have gone on with a lot of the projects that have occurred through that resort corridor, and it leads to some confusion and some issues. So we're doing a very minimal overlay project to clean that up, really, and to look at that. It's not part of NEON, it just really is a pavement rehabilitation, provided some additional life, but also provide better striping and information through that corridor. Boulder City project, the one that we talked about to help widen through that area between the bridge and I'm not familiar enough with the streets, but up in that area of Buchanan where it was 2-lane intersecting with 4 lanes, that project is now underway. It'll start here in probably the next week or so, and then with the goal of finishing in November. We did work with Arizona, worked with others in temporarily restricting trucks, but also providing detours, again, with the goal of expediting construction through that area. And then on a big picture level is that the federal arena is really, and add a whole bunch of reallys, uncertain. It could have some detrimental impacts to the amount of funding that we receive as a transportation agency. And so I appreciate your staff, Jacob and Fred, and the staff. We met sometime this week, Tuesday this week, and we're in constant communications with our counterparts in D.C. I have testified before Congress many times just recently in strongly urging the resolution of a transportation bill. We're just watching that and hoping for the best, and then we'll be coming up with strategies should a bill not come to be. And so we'll be briefing you, I know, working with Jacob to brief you on that. So also one final item is I will not be at the next two meetings. I'm really disappointed in that because I won't be able to hear all the discussion, but with my AASHTO duties, my presidency will end in October, so I do have some final push of travel and final push of making sure that things are set up a little bit on the national level. So I will see you again then in November, if not before for any reason. And as always, you all please feel free to contact me on items. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman.
just can I want to request something. The director's report is extremely important to all of us. Is there some way we can put her like right after the general manager's report at the beginning of the agendas, Mr. Chairman?
Excellent suggestion.
Director, because I think everyone wants to hear what's happening from you. So,
Of course, now that we're doing that for her, she's not showing up.
she's never coming back.
That's a great suggestion, Steve. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, this meeting is adjourned.